The story starts with the peaceful Silba village nestled within the Santia kingdom. A young boy named Ainz begins his daily training with a wooden sword. Living near the dangerous border of the Gaesan Empire, the villagers must stay combat ready. Ainz wonders why his education focuses strictly on physical weaponry rather than the arcane. A towering instructor barks orders, telling Ainz to keep his guard up during practice. The young boy looks away with a sigh, feeling disconnected from the grueling physical exercises. When he responds too quietly, the instructor immediately demands more spirit from him. The teacher bluntly points out Ainz's apparent lack of talent and urges him to find motivation. Ainz tries to explain that he can already use basic lifestyle magic for fire and water. Dismissing the excuse, the instructor ends the solo drills and calls for mock battles. A more eager student steps forward, ready to prove his strength against Ainz. The two boys take their stances under the watchful eye of their mentor. Shouts fill the air as the practice duel officially begins with a burst of energy. Other children watch the training session with awe, cheering for the oldest student's impressive displays. Ainz considers the tactical advantage of imbuing his wooden training sword with a fire spell. He envisions a strategy where earth magic would immobilize an opponent's feet during a duel. Looking down at a tiny flickering flame, he realizes how much more he needs to learn. The instructor's command echoes through the clearing as he calls Ainz and Sias to battle. Sias boasts about his superior motivation while pointing his sword directly at a weary Ainz. Preparing for the match, Ainz reflects on his true goals while holding his wooden blade. He faces his opponent with newfound determination, vowing to prove the power of his magic. The confrontation concludes in an instant, leaving Ainz sprawled on the ground in a cloud of smoke. Trudging toward home, he rubs a sore spot on his head and wishes for restorative spells. He examines the small fragments of ice he produced by chilling his conjured water. As he walks through the village, he continues to practice his rudimentary elemental arts. The young boy finally reaches his home as the day transitions into a peaceful evening. His mother welcomes him back while tending to a large pot of stew on the hearth. She reminds him to wash the grime away before sitting down for the evening meal. Ainz expertly forms a globule of water in the air, using his inherent magical talent. He splashes the conjured water over his hands to clean himself after the long day. A localized gust of wind magic follows, leaving his hands completely dry and refreshed. A cheerful greeting from the doorway announces his father's return to the warm house. His father enters with a bow in hand and remarks on how tall Ainz has grown lately. Ainz cries out in pain when his father playfully hits him on the head. A sharp scolding from his mother follows as she carries dinner to the table. His father grumbles about being blamed while Ainz defends himself against the playful roughhousing. Ainz points out that his father has also seemingly grown, lightening the heavy atmosphere. Savory stew and fresh bread are served, filling the home with a delicious aroma. Laughter fills the room as the father celebrates his son's recent growth over a drink. Ainz radiates joy, basking in the comfort of a peaceful evening with his parents. Watching them with affection, his mother finds satisfaction in their quiet family life. They finish their meal together, cherishing the normalcy of another typical day. Night soon falls over the village, blanketing the sky in a sea of stars. The young boy eventually retreats to his bed and falls into a heavy slumber. Without warning, his eyes snap open as he is jolted awake in the darkness. Sitting upright, he scans the shadows of his quiet room with a puzzled look. A strange feeling of intuition prompts him to investigate the silent house. He creeps into the dark hallway and calls out softly for his parents. A faint glow from a distant doorway catches his eye and draws him closer. He chides himself for being careless as he moves through the pitch-black corridor. His foot suddenly slips on the edge of a step he failed to notice. Momentum carries him forward into a clumsy fall against the hard floor. Shaken but unhurt, he stares into the gloom with a look of pure confusion. He looks down at his palm, only to find it coated in dark, splattered stains. Reality fractures when he finds his mother collapsed and motionless on the cold floor. Trembling uncontrollably, he calls out her name, while his vision begins to darken. Fresh droplets of blood trail down the wooden frame of a nearby doorway. His heart hammers against his ribs as a sudden noise forces his eyes to widen. Staring into the gloom, he struggles to comprehend the nightmare unfolding within his home. A horrifying vista of a burning village and fallen bodies stretches out before him. Desperate screams and pleas for mercy echo through the air in a terrifying cacophony. A brutal strike tears through the darkness, spraying blood across the chaotic scene. The violence continues without mercy as another figure is cut down in a flash. Thick smoke and embers rise high as silhouettes move through the ruins of the village. A mysterious man wearing a distinctive crest on his cloak watches the slaughter unfold. Logan and Berg stand their ground, their expressions a mix of sheer terror and resolve. Ainz cries out their names in a desperate, futile attempt to reach them. A horrific, swift blow strikes the two boys down, painting the ground in red. He remains frozen in place, staring at the cruelty with a look of pure disbelief. Shattered remnants and dark fluid fly through the air as the destruction intensifies. A wave of profound shock washes over his face while he remains paralyzed by fear. He watches as a lone figure flees across the glowing landscape of the burning village. A sinister presence grins nearby, while another figure retreats into the ruins of his world. The scarred man turns with a chillingly calm expression, clutching a small twig in his hand. A glimmer of hope flickers as thoughts of a successful escape cross a survivor's mind. The man maintains his unsettling smirk, his voice cutting through the heavy atmosphere. A sudden realization strikes with the force of a physical blow, leaving him completely stunned. A violent burst of energy erupts, sending a small figure flying backward through the air. Shock paralyzes his features as he witnesses the effortless display of overwhelming power. Words fail him while he stares at the devastation with a mouth agape in horror. The silence of death settles over the ground where a body now lies motionless. A wide eye reflects the pure terror of a mind struggling to process the atrocity. Glancing over his shoulder, the man notices someone still clinging to life amidst the ruin. He approaches the lone survivor who remains huddled and trembling on the barren earth. Paralyzed by the predator's presence, the child can only stare up in mute desperation. The man questions the lack of resistance, his tone dripping with a mocking curiosity. Shadows stretch across the landscape as he lectures the survivor on the futility of their companions' deaths. Leaning forward, he challenges the survivor's dignity for failing to act while others perished. Silence is the only response as the weight of the tragedy anchors the survivor to the spot. Dismissing the situation as a pathetic display, the man begins to pace across the wreckage. He levels his hand forward, holding the small branch as if it were a deadly weapon. Looking back at a fresh corpse, he remarks on the hollow nature of showing mercy. He concludes by noting how the concept of magic was entirely foreign to the doomed villagers. Ainz stares at his hands in disbelief as the concept of magic becomes a terrifying reality. The scarred man prepares a shortened chant, readying a specialized lightning spell for another strike. A massive bolt of electricity descends, reducing a nearby building to a heap of splintered wood. The young survivor huddles on the ground while the wreckage of his home rains down around him. Standing amidst the smoke and rising flames, the perpetrator's silhouette looms over the total devastation. A cruel smirk plays on the man's lips as he boasts about his offensive magic. Shards of broken timber are stained with blood, marking the spot where life was abruptly extinguished. A trembling hand reaches out from the darkness, grasping at the air in a final plea. An eye wide with trauma reflects the burning ruins of the village and the loss of everything. The mage strolls away from the carnage, his mocking laughter echoing through the field of corpses. Urgent voices pierce the silence as villagers discover a faint sign of life beneath the rubble. The sound of shifting debris rings out while the survivors work together to clear the path. Grunts of effort fill the air as the villagers heave heavy beams away from the child. Two figures stand in stunned silence, looking down at the small form they have finally reached. A man and a woman exchange worried glances while confirming that the young boy is still breathing. Three survivors gather around the unconscious child, marveling at his unlikely survival from the magical blast. 3 days later, the morning light reveals a peaceful cluster of houses far from the site of tragedy. A sudden cry of alarm echoes from the roof of a small cottage, breaking the morning quiet. A bucket of water tips over in the rush, splashing wildly across the wooden floor. Three women stand in a state of shock, discovering that the boy has woken up with a burning fever. Ainz sits upright in his sickbed, his body wrapped in thick bandages as he gazes out the window. A kind-hearted woman approaches the bedside, expressing her relief that the young boy has finally regained consciousness. Small figures in the dialogue bubbles wonder if the child can even understand their language. The boy remains silent, his one visible eye filled with a chillingly calm intensity despite his trauma. He listens intently as the reality of his situation begins to settle within his mind. The survivors explain that he is currently in Tasu village and that Silba village no longer exists. A heavy silence falls as they reveal he was the only person found alive among the ruins. Silica lowers her gaze, mentioning the severe state of his limbs when they first discovered him. Ainz bluntly states that he already knows the truth because he witnessed every moment of the destruction. He looks down at his bandaged form, haunted by the memory of standing by while his world burned. The women pause their explanation, noticing that his right eye is no longer functional due to his injuries. Kalia gently suggests giving the boy some space after he reveals his name is Ainz. After introducing themselves, the two women exit the room to prepare a meal for their guest. Left alone in the quiet room, Ainz focuses his thoughts on the devastating offensive magic he saw. Determination takes hold as he decides to test if he can replicate the Lightning Man's power. He leans toward the open window and extends a trembling, bandaged arm into the air. Frustration flickers across his face when his initial attempt results in absolutely nothing happening. Shifting his focus, he concentrates on his innate ability to generate water and how to project it. A small, shimmering orb of water slowly coalesces just above the center of his palm. He thrusts his hand forward in a sharp motion, attempting to launch the liquid projectile like a weapon. The water projectile slams into the wall with immense force, shattering the wooden frame and causing wreckage. Silence fills the room in the aftermath of the impact, punctuated only by the boy's heavy breathing. Ainz stares at his bandaged hand in utter shock. Realizing he has finally succeeded in manifesting magic, he recalls the lightning-wielding man, understanding that witnessing powerful spells has sharpened his own mental visualization. Eager to experiment further, he focuses his mind on an even more intense and destructive image. He thrusts his hand forward, attempting to conjure a fire capable of incinerating everything in its path. Silica suddenly bursts into the room with a tray of hot soup, her face bright with kindness. Her smile instantly fades as she beholds the shattered furniture and the chaos within the small room. Panicked by the sight, she screams about a fire and loses her grip on the food tray. The bowl of hot soup tumbles through the air and splashes violently against the floorboards. Ainz recoils and yelps as the boiling liquid burns him, his attempt at fire magic completely interrupted. From an overhead perspective, the room is a disaster zone of spilled soup and broken wooden debris. Amidst the confusion, Ainz concludes that the true secret to magic lies in the accuracy of one's image. He clenches his fist with a dark grin, finding the potential for growth to be incredibly fascinating. Silica delivers an angry chop to the top of his head, screaming that this is not funny. Sitting amidst the mess, Ainz ignores the pain and asks Silica about the basics of lifestyle magic. His eye sparkles with a newfound obsession as he asks her to teach him everything she knows. Silica looks at him with a mixture of suspicion and concern, baffled by his sudden change in attitude. They go back and forth as the boy tries to explain his desperate need to understand magic. Silica stands over him, scolding him for obsessing over spells while ignoring his own injuries and family. Ainz tilts his head with a bewildered expression as he tries to process Silica's sudden intensity. Silica stands before him with a dark and serious shadow over her eyes, radiating an intense pressure. She places her hands on his shoulders and gently explains that she now considers him her younger brother. Silica looks at him with sadness while listing the physical parts of him that were broken. Even with his body wrapped in bandages, the boy remains obsessed with a small light flickering at his fingertip. A grim memory surfaces of his broken body lying face down on the dirt when Silica first found him. Fueled by a sense of responsibility, Silica clenches her fist and resolves to take care of him herself. 2 years later, she cheerfully pushes the boy through the village in a wheelchair under a clear sky. A group of local children watch them pass, their expressions full of mockery and disdain for the outsider. They begin shouting cruel insults and throwing stones, demanding that the useless boy leave their village at once. Silica loses her temper and screams at the bullies, chasing them away as they flee in terror. Once they are alone, she sighs and asks Ainz if he is all right while commenting on the weather. He stares at a ginkgo leaf in his hand and quietly assures her that their words do not hurt. The pair travels further away from the village, passing through vast fields toward a solitary and massive tree. Silica reaches their usual destination and brings the wheelchair to a steady halt with her firm grip. A sudden gust of wind sweeps across the landscape, carrying hundreds of leaves up into the clouds. The boy looks back at her with a soft expression and offers his thanks for bringing him here. Silica stands behind him and mentions starting her knitting while they enjoy the quiet scenery together. She suddenly pauses and looks up in surprise as a faint sound breaks the silence around them. With a determined gaze, Ainz extends his hand and releases a small puff of magical energy into the breeze. The massive tree stands tall as wind sweeps through the open fields. Ainz releases a concentrated blast of magic that strikes the sturdy trunk with a loud impact. Silica watches him while recalling how he asked to be brought here for his practice. He remains silent and focused while deep in thought during their quiet training session. Silica continues her knitting in the grass as Ainz gazes out toward the distant horizon. After finishing his training for the day, the boy expresses his gratitude for the successful practice. The two begin their journey back toward the village along a narrow path between wooden fences. They suddenly stop when they notice unusual smoke or dust rising from the village center. Silica looks on with a bewildered and worried expression as she tries to understand the situation. A group of panicked villagers gathers together near the edge of the settlement in clear distress. Silica's father comes running toward them while shouting their names in a state of high alarm. He frantically explains that some of the village children have disappeared into the dangerous forest. Silica stares toward the dark tree line in fear as she mentions the monsters lurking within. The father calls for the local men to arm themselves and prepare for a search mission. He instructs Silica to return home immediately to help gather necessary supplies for the group. Ainz observes the chaotic scene from his wheelchair with a quiet and unreadable expression. He tells them to go ahead without him, insisting he can make it back safely alone. Silica and her father race off toward the woods, leaving the boy behind on the trail. Alone at last, Ainz narrows his eyes with a cold and calculating sense of purpose. He touches his chin and wonders if his current magic is enough to handle the lurking beasts. Ainz begins chanting a spell while resting his hand on his wheelchair. He suddenly accelerates forward with a burst of magical speed. While he passes, a small chick drops its treasure in sheer astonishment. The boy zips past a group of stunned villagers who watch in disbelief. A woman pauses her conversation as the strange spectacle speeds by. Without slowing down, he aims directly for the dark forest tree line. The wheelchair leaves deep ruts in the dirt as it carries him away. Soon he arrives at the edge of the dense, foreboding forest and stops. Taking a deep breath, he reminds himself to proceed with absolute caution. The boy rolls deeper into the oppressive darkness of the woods alone. He recites a dark incantation to sharpen his senses for the coming fight. A cold smirk forms on his face as he prepares to strike. Moments later, he notices many pairs of glowing eyes in the shadows. A massive, wolf-like monster lunges forward only to meet a water spell. Ainz points a single finger to unleash a lethal blade of pressurized water. The beast is instantly cleaved in half by the power of his magic. In another part of the forest, a man cries out in desperation. A defender braces for impact while gripping their weapon with trembling hands. A savage creature bites down on a metal blade during the struggle. Silica swings her sword downward to strike at the beasts in the chaos. A warrior stands paralyzed by shock as the gravity of their situation sinks in. Silica wipes grime and blood from her face while struggling to regain her composure. The small group of survivors huddles in a clearing to catch their breath. A survivor expresses their fear as the forest seems to close in on them. Silica struggles to control her breathing as she contemplates the boy's dangerous situation. With weapons drawn, the defenders vow to find and rescue their missing friend immediately. Deep in the woods, Ainz hums a melody while navigating through the dense brush. A trail of lifeless monsters lies scattered behind him on the forest floor. Another defeated beast remains motionless in the grass as he continues his journey. The boy reflects on the odd nature of the local wildlife while moving forward. His expression turns serious as he senses an unusual presence nearby. A small isolated cabin emerges from the darkness of the heavy foliage. The wheelchair rolls across the open grass toward the silent wooden structure. He notes the peculiar lack of monster tracks near the perimeter of the building. Glowing eyes watch from the shadows but dare not approach the mysterious home. Concluding that a magical influence protects the area, he reaches the front door. The boy pushes his way inside as light spills out from the interior. He comes to a sudden halt, his eyes widening at an unexpected sight. 3 terrified children huddle together in a room filled with massive bookshelves. Setting aside his questions, he tells the group they are returning to the village. Ainz urges the children to move quickly as they prepare to vacate the forest cabin. The small party makes its way across the clearing while leaving the wooden home behind. Walking nervously beside the wheelchair, the children keep a vigilant eye on the dark trees. A sudden realization of danger causes one of the boys to freeze in pure terror. Nightmarish creatures materialize from the shadows to surround the group with menacing stares. Undeterred by the threat, the young mage prepares a high-level freezing spell with focused intent. A surge of ice magic instantly engulfs a massive wolf monster mid-pounce. The creature is petrified into a block of frost before it can land a single blow. Jagged shards of ice explode across the battlefield as the surrounding monsters are decimated. A final giant beast crumbles into dust under the weight of the magical onslaught. Meanwhile, the search party from the village remains on edge while scouring the perimeter. Their gazes fixate on the horizon as a familiar silhouette appears in the dim light. The children cheer and wave their arms excitedly as they recognize their rescuers approaching. Shock and relief wash over the faces of the village warriors at the unexpected reunion. One of the men ruffles a child's hair while laughing at their safe return. Silica delivers a sharp smack to a boy's head to ground him after the chaos. A massive bonfire is lit in the center of the village to ward off the darkness. Watching the festivities from a distance, Silica maintains a pensive and watchful expression. Two survivors share a deep, tearful embrace to celebrate the end of their separation. The group finally relaxes together, sharing stories of their survival as the fire burns bright. Ein sits quietly in his wheelchair beneath the vast, shimmering tapestry of the night sky. Several villagers gather around the young mage to offer their sincere and humble apologies. Three of the local children bow their heads low while expressing deep regret for their actions. The unexpected show of kindness and respect leaves Ainz momentarily stunned into silence. His neighbors admit they were wrong to see him as an outsider and seek his forgiveness. Downplaying his bravery, the boy claims his actions were merely driven by personal, magical curiosity. Silica watches the interaction from behind with a knowing and gentle smile on her face. She suddenly springs up with playful energy to tease him about his growing sense of guilt. A look of mild annoyance crosses his face as he tries to process her cheerful banter. The villagers discuss how the once distant boy has finally begun to open his heart to others. A veteran warrior smiles warmly while celebrating the genuine bonds that have formed between them. They officially welcome him as a respected and vital member of their community. An unfamiliar and overwhelming sensation begins to stir deep within the young mage's chest. He struggles to comprehend the intense warmth radiating through his heart at their acceptance. Without warning, Ainz points toward the dark woods and announces a life-altering decision. The gathered crowd freezes in collective shock at the suddenness of his bold proclamation. He explains his resolve to live in the forest cabin to focus on his research and atonement. Silica stands frozen in disbelief as she processes his determination to move out on his own. The tension breaks into boisterous laughter as the group realizes his obsession with magic remains unchanged. His friends offer their supportive farewells, encouraging him to pursue the path he has chosen. Ainz listens with a faint smile as the villagers promise to visit him in the forest. He bows deeply to the gathered crowd, expressing his gratitude beneath a vast canopy of stars. Time passes peacefully at the small log cabin tucked away in the heart of the woods. Quills and ink stay ready on a wooden desk surrounded by piles of advanced magical research. A steady set of rhythmic footsteps rings out across the floorboards as a new morning begins. The young man fastens his dark coat, preparing himself for a significant change in his routine. Reclaiming his full name, Ainz Sylvestus moves with a refined and focused sense of self. Physical scars and losses no longer hinder the immense power he has cultivated in solitude. He ensures his sword is properly fastened before finally deciding to leave his secluded home. The heavy front door swings wide, signaling the end of his long period of isolation. With one booted foot in a sleek prosthetic, he crosses the threshold into the bright sunlight. The grown mage stands confidently at the entrance, his long hair billowing in the gentle breeze. Thoughts of magical mastery fill his mind as autumn leaves swirl through the vibrant air. He hums a light-hearted melody while allowing a small woodland bird to perch on his hand. The sudden flutter of wings startles him momentarily as the creature darts back into the trees. He acknowledges with a pensive look that it has been years since he last left this forest. Reaching a majestic stone rotunda, he stops to take in the sprawling view of the landscape. He stands beneath the high arches, marveling at how much can change over several long years. The click of his prosthetic echoes on the stone path as he ventures further from home. A flock of birds ascends into the clear sky as his new journey unfolds across the horizon. Ainz approaches a solitary, ancient tree standing tall in the middle of a vast grassy plain. He discovers a woman with strikingly long hair immersed in a thick book beneath the branches. She remains focused on the pages, her expression hidden as she murmurs quietly to herself. Ainz pauses in his tracks, his eyes widening with curiosity at the unexpected encounter. Cautiously moving closer, he addresses the stranger while she continues her study without looking up. The woman finally speaks, explaining that she is currently engrossed in reading a magical grimoire. She holds up the book to show him, though her tone suggests he should already know this. She shifts her weight and begins to question his presence in this secluded area. Pulling her cloak tight, she asserts her authority over the land they stand upon. Ainz quickly raises his hands to show he means no harm, offering a nervous smile. The woman reacts with sudden shock as she realizes something about the man before her. Her temper flares instantly, and she berates him for his perceived insolence and lack of manners. Ainz remains speechless, his gaze fixed on the woman as she continues her harsh reprimand. They stand far apart beneath a tree, while she explains the sacred nature of the territory. Tension spikes as her hand reaches for the hilt of the blade she carries at her side. Without hesitation, she draws her sword and levels the sharp steel directly at his chest. Ainz narrows his eyes and prepares to cast a defensive spell, his expression turning cold and focused. The woman watches with a mix of surprise and skepticism as he initiates his magical incantation. Ainz continues to gesture outward, pointing out that he is currently unarmed and posing no threat. She stands her ground firmly, gripped by a resolve to defend the sacred site from the interloper. Ainz walks calmly through the thick grass while the sun shines down on the open field. A sudden realization strikes as the conversation takes a sharp and unexpected turn. His sword remains embedded in the earth between them while they maintain a wary distance. Ainz attempts to smooth things over with a pleasant smile and an open posture. The woman loses her cool completely, erupting into a comical fit of frustration and shouting. She reaches out desperately to stop him when he mentions the name of a familiar village. Ainz glances back with a somber expression, confirming his deep connection to the lost place. Wide-eyed with disbelief, she pauses her rant and asks for his identity. He formally introduces himself as Ainz Sylvestas, identifying his profession as a skilled mage. The woman breathes his name in a whisper, her previous aggression vanishing into pure astonishment. Her mind races as she connects the pieces of his identity with the rumors she knows. A moment of utter confusion follows as she struggles to process the gravity of his reveal. Ainz tilts his head in concern while she reacts with a sudden, startled jump. She frantically begs him to join her, waving her hands in a desperate plea for his cooperation. Standing tall, she introduces herself as Sophia, a member of the elite Silver Snow Knights. Ainz continues to walk away, despite her persistent attempts to bribe him with a warm meal. They soon arrive at a bustling marketplace filled with vendors and busy townspeople. A display of fresh, dark fruit catches his eye as they pass through the lively square. Sophia leads the way while Ainz remains distracted by the various sights and sounds of town. His eyes sparkle with excitement at the prospect of finally sitting down for a hot breakfast. Sophia leads Ainz toward the massive, multi-story brick headquarters of the Silver Snow Knights. Ainz gazes up in awe at the sheer size of the building before following her past the guards. His curiosity grows as they step through the arched entryway into the grand interior. The pair walks past rows of tall pillars while ascending a wide wooden staircase. They pass by vast libraries where countless volumes of knowledge are meticulously shelved. Moving deeper into the facility, Ainz observes the intricate circular patterns adorning the ceiling. Sophia reassures him with a quick glance when he expresses doubt about his presence there. The two of them eventually reach a sturdy door at the end of a long hallway. Sophia wraps her knuckles against the wood and waits for permission to enter. The door slowly creaks open to reveal a spacious and sunlit office. A bearded man looks up from his mountain of paperwork to greet the visitors. Ainz stands awkwardly to the side while the man stares at him with intense scrutiny. A look of utter shock washes over the man's face as he realizes who stands before him. He suddenly slams his hand onto the desk telephone in a burst of wild energy. With a boisterous laugh, he shouts into the receiver while Sophia tries to protest his assumptions. Sophia erupts in a blushing fury, vehemently denying the man's teasing remarks about her personal life. The man settles back into his chair and thoughtfully wonders about Ainz's true identity. She cuts him off to deliver a formal request on behalf of her new guest. Standing at attention, she demands the kitchen prepare a high-class breakfast with coffee and dessert. The commander stares back in silent confusion at the bold and unexpected order. A hearty breakfast of eggs, sausages, and buttered toast is served to the hungry guest. Ainz beams with joy and offers a grateful thanks before diving into his meal. While he eats enthusiastically, Sophia provides the commander with a detailed explanation of their situation. The commander listens intently, his brow furrowed as he processes the gravity of her report. Following a brief moment of silence, The atmosphere in the office becomes notably more somber. Reaching for the telephone, the commander prepares to take a decisive and unexpected action. He stands up and exerts his full strength to shove his massive wooden desk aside. Revealing a hidden magical seal on the floor, he activates the ancient mechanism with his touch. Sophia watches in disbelief, her voice trembling as she realizes what her superior is doing. The floorboards part ways to uncover a secret storage vault concealed beneath the office. With a grim expression, the commander reaches into the dark opening to retrieve a relic. He pulls out a legendary black tome titled The Original, which radiates in intense power. This ancient grimoire holds secrets from 2 millennia ago that very few can safely handle. Gripping the heavy volume tightly, the commander prepares to show the object to the young boy. He turns to Sophia and sternly warns her that this matter must remain strictly confidential. Sophia immediately agrees to his command, her face showing the weight of the secret. The commander then presents the mysterious book to Ainz and asks if he recognizes it. Ainz looks up from his breakfast and admits that he has never seen it before. Despite the tension, the boy innocently asks if he might be allowed to look inside. The commander reluctantly extends the book toward him while warning him of its immense power. Ainz takes the legendary black book into his hands without any hesitation. As he opens the heavy cover, his fingers graze pages filled with ancient script and complex diagrams. He begins flipping through the legendary grimoire with casual ease, leaving his companions completely speechless. The commander watches with a look of pure terror, sweating profusely at the boy's nonchalant handling of the artifact. A sudden realization strikes the room as the weight of the situation becomes even more intense. Holding the book up, Ainz explains with a smile that this volume is actually just a collection of his old notes. Sophia freezes in place, her mind reeling at the claim that a world-class relic is merely a personal notebook. The young woman looks on in utter disbelief, her face turning pale as she processes the impossible statement. Ainz continues by explaining he simply wrote down minor magic to help the villagers with their daily chores. He then points to a specific section of the open page where his own name is clearly inscribed. An eye widens in pure shock as the truth behind the boy's identity begins to settle in. The commander remains silent, contemplating the terrifying fact that the name matches the legendary mage of old. To their further astonishment, Ainz produces a pen and starts correcting mistakes he finds within the ancient text. He stares intently at the pages, focused entirely on fixing the errors in what was thought to be a perfect work. Overwhelmed by the divine display of knowledge, Sophia falls to her knees and lets out a loud, emotional cry. She weeps uncontrollably, her heart swelling with reverence for the legendary figure sitting right in front of her. The commander can only stare in the stunned silence, his previous authority completely eclipsed by the boy's casual brilliance. He realizes that by editing the text, Ainz has significantly increased the magical potency of the already powerful artifact. Sophia continues her dramatic display of devotion, while Ainz looks on, confused by her sudden change in behavior. She remains prostrated on the floor, finally acknowledging that this boy has survived and surpassed 2,000 years of history. The commander gazes at the boy in a state of tearful, emotional overload, following which Ainz looks back with a flat expression as the man wipes his eyes. The young mage soon lets out a cheerful laugh while discussing his research in the forest. He then casually hands the legendary book back across the table after finishing a meal, announcing his plans to depart on a journey once his business is concluded. Meanwhile, a brief reflection occurs regarding the historical legends of Science Evan and Silica. Appearing more composed, the commander smiles warmly and offers his full support for the trip. Ainz rises from his seat with a sense of calm resolve to signal his readiness. Sophia enthusiastically chimes in to suggest they visit the royal capital of Kilk next. She goes on to describe the prestigious Magic Academy, where talented practitioners gather. The commander immediately offers travel funds and assigns Sophia to serve as his guide. Showing deep gratitude for the book's influence, he urges the boy to accept the gift. Ainz pauses for a moment before giving a soft smile and accepting their assistance. Sophia beams with pure joy, her eyes squeezed shut as she shouts in excitement. The pair eventually walks out together as the boy contemplates the evolution of magic. He wears a knowing grin while thinking about the vast cultural shifts over time. Walking beside him, Sophia maintains a look of intense focus and anticipation. They eventually approach a vibrant town square filled with bustling market stalls. The path continues across a vast landscape of rolling hills and distant mountains. A hand firmly grips the hilt of a sword as they reach the capital. Ainz cuts through the thick forest overgrowth while discussing the versatility of his current situation. Sophia walks behind him as he skillfully clears the path with his sword. She speaks with deep admiration about the legendary mage known as Silver Snow Ainz. The boy listens quietly to her high praise for the man he used to be. He innocently asks her who she is talking about with a slight tilt of his head. Sophia pauses in shock before realizing he might not know the famous historical figures. She explains that the mage was a literal god of magic while Ainz remains quiet. Her face flushes with excitement as she mentions her dream of learning from such a master. Ainz experiences a moment of comedic distress upon hearing her impossible expectations. Sensing a shift in the atmosphere, she decides to change the subject to something else. She asks why a mage like him is carrying such a well-used sword. Looking at him with newfound intensity, she notes that his swordsmanship is surprisingly high level. He smiles gently while keeping his focus on the trail ahead of them. The young man explains that physical movement and magic are two sides of the same coin. Sophia looks on with confusion as she examines the simple and seemingly cheap blade. A sudden and violent sound erupts from the trees to interrupt their conversation. Both travelers freeze in place as they sense a powerful and dangerous presence. A massive armor bearer emerges from the shadows to tower over the small path. Sophia quickly positions herself in front of the boy to act as his shield. Ainz calmly steps forward with a reassuring look to handle the situation himself. Ainz confronts the beast with an easy smile while Sophia screams for him to stay back. She watches in terror as he approaches the monster with nothing but a basic sword. Without hesitation, the young man lunges forward with a speed that defies physical limits. A blinding flash of motion erupts across the clearing as he strikes the bear. The massive creature widens its eyes in sheer confusion at the unexpected counterattack. A powerful kinetic force ripples through the air and flattens the surrounding grass. Sophia stares in complete disbelief at the casual display of overwhelming power. He turns back with a playful look while maintaining his calm and focused demeanor. Reaching out with his foot, he gives the towering monster a seemingly gentle tap. That small movement carries the force of a mountain and sends the bear soaring. The beast crashes violently through the dense trees under the sheer weight of the impact. Its face smashes into the dirt as it struggles to comprehend the sudden defeat. Speechless and trembling, Sophia can only gape at the impossible scene unfolding before her. Ainz casually explains that he simply reinforced his physical strikes with concentrated magic. The armor bear pushes itself back up and radiates an even more intense bloodlust. Noticing the creature's rage, Sophia warns him, but he merely sighs and prepares again. The monster bellows a deafening roar and charges at the two travelers once more. Narrowing his eyes, the mage decides to combine his blade skills with a chant. He draws his second weapon and meets the bear's massive claws with lethal precision. With a final elegant leap, he severs the monster's head to end the battle instantly. A powerful aftershock from the final strike ripples through the empty air. The defeated armor bear collapses onto the grass in a massive heap. Sophia stands frozen in awe as she praises his incredible display of skill. Ainz explains that true magic requires movements that match its manifestation. He glances down at the simple blade that endured the intense pressure. Without warning, the metal shatters and the sword snaps in two. The young man looks down at the broken hilt with mild surprise. Casually tossing the scrap aside, he mentions the need for a new weapon. He offers to personally teach Sophia the secrets of magical control. She reacts with overwhelming joy and gratitude at the generous offer. A sudden noise in the nearby brush catches his immediate attention. Another young adventurer bursts through the trees while searching for the beast. She stops in her tracks upon seeing the monster has been slain. Ainz greets the newcomer with a polite and welcoming smile. The warrior kneels down to inspect the creature's impenetrable hide. She remarks that only a masterpiece sword could have delivered such a blow. The mood shifts when Ainz admits he used a common toy sword. Her expression morphs into sheer shock at his casual revelation. She scrutinizes him closely as if searching for his hidden identity. Her gaze fixes on his arm while she ponders his unbelievable power. The pair begins to walk away from the scene of the recent battle, but the female warrior desperately shouts for them to stop and listen. She places her hands on her hips while insisting she isn't a suspicious person. Her expression softens as she admits she is also in a great hurry. Ainz ignores her and prepares to leave with Sophia following close behind. Sophia points out that the bear's corpse contains extremely valuable materials for crafting. Acknowledging the point, he turns back and extends his hand toward the beast. A faint light emanates from the ornate ring on his finger. The massive creature is suddenly pulled into a magical void and vanishes. The sight leaves the nearby warriors staring in absolute speechless wonder. She begins to panic and asks if he truly possesses a rare item box. He casually explains that he crafted it himself to save money. Her shock deepens as she realizes the level of skill required for such a feat. The young man asks if his identity as a mage is really that surprising. A look of pure joy and realization washes over her face. She suddenly lunges forward and grabs his hand with desperate intensity. Introducing herself as Leica Brandy, she reveals her struggle against a bandit group. Sophia questions why the local knights haven't already dealt with the threat. Leica explains that the group is led by a particularly troublesome mage. His eyes widen with sudden interest at the mention of a fellow magic user. Leica mentions that the enemy mage uses a strange magic she has never seen before. Hearing this, Ainz listens with a confident and intrigued expression on his face. Sophia smiles while stating that she is already devoted to serving Ainz. Overcome with relief, Leica clasps her hands together and shouts in excitement. Ainz introduces himself properly and admits he is eager to witness this new magic. As the group sprints across the landscape, Leica learns Sophia belongs to a famous knighthood. The warrior asks if the group is well known while they rush toward their destination. She praises the noble knights who protect the Holy Lands, causing Sophia to look disgruntled. Leica suddenly stops speaking and reacts with a look of sharp realization. Sophia remains focused on the path ahead with a stoic and determined gaze. Reaching the edge of a field, the group hears the sounds of an active battlefield. Ainz asks for specific details regarding the techniques the enemy mage typically employs. Leica explains that while they use basic elements, their mysterious magic is the real threat. She describes how the magic restricts their movements and prevents them from attacking. Sophia contemplates the strange ability to stop a warrior from swinging their sword. Ainz admits that even he is unfamiliar with magic that imposes such strict physical limitations. While running, Leica asks if Ainz is capable of performing any form of healing magic. She explains that her supply of restorative potions has nearly been exhausted during the fighting. The warrior's eyes widen as she suddenly senses something unusual in the distance. Ainz narrows his eyes and focuses his attention on a sudden disturbance ahead. Leica watches the scene with a heavy heart, her expression filled with silent anxiety. As the group moves forward, leaving a trail across the desolate, white landscape, a young boy remains behind, kneeling in a pool of blood while crying out for help. He desperately holds his wounded sister, both children soaked in the grim aftermath of battle. With a broken voice, the boy begs for anyone to save his dying sibling. Ainz looks down at the grieving pair with a stern and unwavering gaze. The sister lies motionless in the boy's arms, her life force slowly fading away. Sophia notes the severity of the wounds and the dwindling supply of their healing potions. She realizes the importance of saving her magic power for the upcoming conflicts. When the boy asks to learn healing magic, Ainz immediately shuts down the request. Sophia averts her eyes, feeling the weight of the boy's desperation and their limited options. Ainz candidly informs the youth that he lacks the natural talent for traditional magic. However, he identifies a hidden potential for the more complex art of sorcery. Ainz decides to bestow his knowledge upon the boy, startling his two companions. Filled with a newfound sense of hope, the boy expresses his profound gratitude. Ainz tells the others to proceed without him while he prepares to help the child. He places his confidence in Sophia, asking her to handle the lead in his absence. This direct show of reliance causes Sophia to blush intensely, her usual stoicism vanishing. The two women quickly rush off toward the battlefield, leaving the master behind. The boy asks if his new mentor is a mage, but Ainz identifies himself specifically as a sorcerer. The boy looks up in confusion as Ainz begins to explain the fundamental differences between magic and sorcery, illustrating how traditional magic requires a natural reservoir of mana that the boy simply does not possess, which leaves the young child visibly shaken by the harsh reality of his own magical insignificance. Shifting his explanation, Ainz focuses on the boy while preparing to reveal the nature of sorcery, as the mentor describes sorcery as an unnatural interference with the world's laws requiring something beyond mana, prompting the boy to listen with newfound intensity as he learns that his own willpower is the key. Then the mentor gestures toward a ring on his hand, introducing the concept of a heavy price, explaining that a sacred vow must be established to bridge the gap between human desire and reality, offering a chance to rewrite his dying sister's fate if he is willing to accept a difficult trial. The boy finally introduces himself as Leet, his voice steady despite the overwhelming pressure of the moment. With a knowing smile, Ainz accepts the name, and prepares to initiate the transfer of his arcane knowledge. Standing tall over the kneeling youth, the sorcerer officially takes him on as a temporary disciple. His eyes narrow with intense focus as he invokes a specialized technique to begin the healing process. A brilliant light emanates from his hand as he applies a miraculous force to the sister's grievous wounds. Leet watches in stunned silence, his eyes widening at the impossible display of power unfolding before him. Elsewhere, Sophia and Leica sprint across the snowy terrain toward the unmistakable scent of fresh blood. Sophia quickly devises a plan, assigning herself the task of holding back the enemy while Leica heals. She looks down at their remaining supplies, realizing they have very few potions left for the injured. She suddenly slaps her own cheeks to banish any lingering doubt and regain her composure for the fight. With a look of fierce determination, she commits to doing everything within her power to save the survivors. Sophia and Leica sprint through the dense foliage toward the chaotic sounds of battle. Arriving at a clearing where they witness a brutal skirmish already in progress. Sophia suddenly halts, feeling an oppressive magical force beginning to restrict her natural movements. Several hostile figures emerge from the shadows, alerted by the arrival of the newcomers. A bandit draws his blade, intending to cut down the intruders before they can interfere. A massive explosion of smoke and mana tears across the field, obscuring the combatants. Sophia quickly points toward the center of the conflict. Identifying a specific target for Leica, she identifies the man in the black robe as the primary threat behind the massacre. The mysterious sorcerer remains calm, his face hidden beneath a hood as he watches them. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Sophia prepares herself for a high-stakes confrontation. The bandits leer at her, underestimating the skill of the woman standing before them. They boast about their easy victory and the potential prize she represents to them. Sophia's gaze turns icy as she listens to their vulgar and dismissive remarks. Moving with blinding speed, she unsheathes her blade and cuts through the bandits effortlessly. Leica stands paralyzed for a moment, marveling at the sheer power of the Silver Snow Knights. Barked orders from Sophia snap her back to reality, urging her to prioritize the wounded. She pivots instantly, refocusing her attention on the survivors who desperately need medical aid. As she works, she can't help but feel unnerved by the mage's lingering presence. The dark-robed man acknowledges that she is far more skilled than any ordinary warrior. Corbelli sneers with disdain, declaring his absolute hatred for those who rely on swordsmanship. Corbelli chants a shortened incantation, conjuring 5 fire lances to strike his opponent. The searing beams of magic tear through the air with lethal precision. Sophia raises her blade to deflect the incoming magical assault with a swift motion. A thunderous clash echoes through the area as the spells dissipate upon contact. She stands her ground, her gaze fixed intently on the dark-robed sorcerer. The mage observes her weapon, realizing he is facing a rare anti-magic sword. Sophia tightens her grip on her hilt, challenging him to show the extent of his power. The two opponents lock eyes across the clearing, prepared for the next exchange. Meanwhile, Leica begins administering the potions Ina's provided to the fallen warriors. She pauses in confusion as she notices something unusual about the healing drafts. Reaching into the bag, she pulls out more supplies and marvels at their abundance. She realizes the leather item box is a national treasure-class artifact. The realization that Ines possesses such rare items leaves her completely stunned. Nearby, the wounded soldiers shout in disbelief as their injuries vanish instantly. Leica confirms these are high potions, far more potent than what Ines claimed to make. Her eyes widen with awe as she watches the impossible recovery of the group. Seeing the men back on their feet, she urges them to join the counterattack. Across the field, the sorcerer begins another rapid chant to intensify his magic. A barrage of fire orbs manifests behind Sophia, threatening to overwhelm her position. She nimbly evades the magical assault, dismissing the mage's attempt to win by numbers. A burst of speed creates sharp lines of movement across the battlefield. Sophia declares his efforts futile while readying her next defensive stance. The sorcerer stands still, silently observing her with a cold and calculating gaze. He mocks her lineage, dismissing her as nothing more than a country bumpkin. Sophia sharply retorts, demanding he address the Silver Snow Knights with proper respect. The mage blames the Eternal Witch for spreading flawed copies of original magic. Spreading his arms wide, he challenges her to witness true magic from Ines. He begins a formal incantation about alchemists and the transmutation of elements. Sophia notes with concern that she has never heard this specific chant before. She launches herself forward, hoping to strike before the spell is fully cast. Corbelli smiles menacingly, declaring that attempting to run is a complete loss. A sudden magical force trips her up, disrupting her momentum instantly. Strange geometric symbols manifest around her as she gasps in total shock. A violent concussive blast slams into her, forcing a pained cry. The sorcerer continues his curse, stating that even standing up is now futile. Sophia struggles on the ground, her body pinned by the invisible magical pressure. She tries to force her arms to move against the crushing weight. The mage laughs, claiming that swinging her sword has become an impossibility. He conjures 20 massive fire lances that fill the darkened sky above. Sophia looks up in silent horror as the overwhelming magical barrage begins its descent. A massive magical upheaval sweeps across the field as silhouettes stand against the swirling energy. Sophia collapses under the immense strain, coughing up blood while her body remains pinned. Corbelli watches her struggle with a twisted smile, reveling in his perceived total victory. Witnessing the devastation, a companion cries out Sophia's name in a moment of pure desperation. The sorcerer suddenly pauses, his head tilting as he senses an unexpected shift in the atmosphere. Rushing to the fallen knight's side, a young woman urgently offers a restorative potion. Sophia takes a deep gulp of the liquid as it begins to circulate through her system. A brief moment of absolute stillness follows, while the magical essence repairs her broken body. She gazes at her vanishing wounds in disbelief as her strength returns in an instant. Standing tall once more, she fiercely commands Corbelli to prepare for his imminent defeat. The mage's grin fades into a scowl upon realizing his enemies possess high-quality healing supplies. Sophia immediately directs the mage and knight units to execute a coordinated flanking maneuver. The soldiers' boots hit the ground with purpose as they begin to encircle their target. Corbelli's face contorts into a predatory leer, hinting at a much more sinister counterattack. An enormous dark shadow suddenly engulfs the entire group, halting their advance in an instant. Sophia's jaw drops as she witnesses an overwhelming presence manifest directly before her eyes. Her companion freezes in place, her gaze locked onto the terrifying new threat above. One of the knights stares upward in paralyzed silence, his sword trembling in his grip. Confusion ripples through the ranks as the air itself grows heavy with malevolent intent. Another soldier remains rooted to the spot, sweating profusely as the true horror unfolds. Soldiers scramble in a panic while shouting warnings, their weapons held high in a state of confusion. Then sudden impacts create a scene of chaos as painful cries echo throughout the battlefield. While the woman with long hair watches the unfolding events with a look of grim determination, the hooded figure speaks calmly about the limitations of healing potions in a prolonged fight. As a terrifying grin appears on the mage's face during his announcement of an offensive chant, a hand reaches down to grasp the child's head, preparing to deliver a direct mental surge. While the fingers tighten their hold, the sorcerer explains the process of transferring knowledge, allowing a focused energy to flow between the two as the hand remains firmly in place. The tall figure in the high-collared coat stares down at the boy with a chilling smile, leaving the young boy motionless, his gaze fixed forward as he endures the heavy contact. Praising the child for his cooperation, the sorcerer prepares to initiate the next phase of magic, until an intense pressure builds around the pair as the magical connection becomes increasingly tangible. Then the mage closes his eyes, confirming that the method of transmission is now fully active, where a close-up reveals a single eye wide with shock and a dawning sense of understanding. A dark silhouette stands against the light, announcing the release of a restricted magical ability, and a massive explosion of white energy surges upward, completely enveloping the surrounding landscape. The sorcerer looks back with a startled expression, sensing an unexpected development in the aura. While a hand approaches the girl's forehead as a tiny orb of light flickers nearby, the girl waits in a trance-like state while the magical essence is gently applied. Two glowing spheres of light float serenely in the void, signifying the end of the exchange. The boy cradles the girl in his arms, checking on her condition with wide, anxious eyes. Realizing with immense relief that his sister has been successfully healed through the sorcerer's power, while the mage observes the result, commenting on the impressive nature of the magical absorption. The child looks up with a joyous smile, tears of gratitude streaming down his cheeks. Then a sharp, sudden clicking sound echoes through the air, catching everyone off guard, prompting the boy to wonder if time itself has come to a standstill. As the sorcerer explains the fundamental principles of the world, while a crack forms overhead, A massive spectral hand materializes in the dark sky, casting a shadow over the duo, leaving the boy to watch in terror as the giant fingers descend toward him, until a mysterious seal manifests within his eye, signaling the activation of a binding vow. He staggers backward from the sudden mental impact, gasping for air in confusion, realizing that he has just been subjected to a permanent magical restriction. Meanwhile, the sorcerer warns him that any violation of this oath will result in death. Placing a finger over his lips to emphasize that the secret must never be shared, a heavy silence falls over the area as the immediate weight of the deal settles. In the distance, observers watch the fading magical light with expressions of deep concern. The hooded antagonist speaks up, declaring his boredom and desire to conclude the battle. As a nearby fighter realizes the enemy's relentless magic is fueled by hidden magic stones, the woman with long hair braces herself, determined to survive the upcoming onslaught. And the hooded mage smiles coldly, ready to fulfill their expectations of a final confrontation. The hooded mage brandishes a glowing magic stone, taunting his victims with their impending demise, and holds up a sacred text, revealing it to be a powerful original manuscript. As a violent shockwave erupts around him, catching the defenders completely by surprise, leaving the long-haired woman to stare in disbelief at the overwhelming display of force, while the antagonist smirks, claiming that anyone who tries to read the text will go insane, and the woman finally understands why the enemy's mana pool seems bottomless, prompting the villain to prepare a final chant to wipe them all out, raining down dozens of fire lances from the sky in a devastating aerial bombardment. But a new presence suddenly walks onto the battlefield, apologizing for the delay. As the girls cry out in relief upon recognizing the arrival of Ainz, causing the hooded mage to scowl at the unexpected interruption of his victory, while the newcomer casually steps forward to face the threat head-on and introduces himself with an air of absolute calm despite the surrounding chaos. Then with a simple gesture of his hand, he prepares to intervene, placing himself as a shield between his allies and the descending magic, as the massive fire lances suddenly dissipate into nothingness before they can strike, leaving the antagonist in a state of pure, wide-eyed shock at the impossible outcome. While one of the girls swoons with heart-shaped eyes at her savior's heroic entrance, and the mage clutches his head in a panic, wondering how his magic was taken over, until Ainz simply confirms his identity as a superior mage with a confident smile. Ainz smiles while recalling a mention of this specific mage from Laika, leaving the antagonist visibly confused by the sudden and informal introduction. But Ainz remains undeterred and dares the man to reveal his true power, causing the villain to shudder at the newcomer's unsettlingly calm demeanor, who then dismisses Ainz as a simple country warrior or a mindless fighter, which prompts Ainz to playfully ask Sophia if she is the one being insulted, before he comically realizes that his own reclusive lifestyle makes him the ultimate bumpkin. Though the hooded mage quickly loses patience and begins a new incantation, loudly proclaiming that he has the situation under control with his superior arts, while Ainz merely notes the use of spoken spells as he takes a step forward, inciting the villain to warn him that getting any closer is a fatal mistake. Yet Ainz continues his leisurely walk across the battlefield without a hint of fear, his gaze narrowing as he observes the enemy's technique with clinical interest. As the antagonist dances and shouts about the absolute defense of his sorcery, but Ainz simply starts breaking down the components of the chant in his mind, before offering a genuine and disarming smile at the interesting display, catching the villain off guard with such a casual and appreciative reaction, while his companions watch the strange interaction with growing bewilderment, and even the most experienced among them struggles to follow the logic of the conversation, until the frustrated mage demands to know why his sacred sorcery is being called mere magic. Ainz matter-of-factly declares that the technique before him is simple magic, not the legendary sorcery he expected, prompting the antagonist to mockingly question if Ainz even understands the power that surpasses high-level magic, while Sophia watches in confusion as she tries to reconcile the villain's claims with Ainz's dismissal, until Ainz finally sighs and calls the entire display a laughable farce, abruptly turning his back on the enemy to suggest they simply leave for Kirk immediately, lamenting his own dashed hopes of witnessing true sorcery while noticing he is still physically barred from moving forward, before bluntly stating that he possesses no interest in dealing with a common magic user, which leaves the once confident antagonist trembling with a mix of shock and mounting rage, until the man explodes in a fit of fury and swears to kill Ainz for his arrogance, unleashing a massive barrage of fireballs through an abridged incantation for a multi-shot fire lance. Yet Ainz remains perfectly calm as he softly whispers the activation for a dispel formula, causing the deadly projectiles to suddenly crack and dissolve into harmless light before they can reach him, sending the attacker into a state of pure panic as he screams in disbelief at the total failure of his spell. After which Ainz casually offers to try copying the very magic the villain takes such pride in, layering his own incantations as he begins a high-level spell involving prohibited matter, pointing a finger toward his foe to forbid the very manipulation of magical power in the vicinity, resulting in a tense moment of absolute silence that leaves the villain paralyzed with dread, who then desperately tries to repeat his Fire Lance incantation, only to find that his magic refuses to manifest, leaving the antagonist staring at his own hands in utter horror as he realizes his power has been stripped away. While Ainz explains the mechanics of his prohibition magic and labels the enemy's technique as nothing more than amateurish, Ainz stares coldly while declaring that he now forbids the very act of breathing, leaving the antagonist frozen in sudden, wide-eyed terror as his lungs fail to function. While the man desperately clutches at his throat in front of his stunned followers, gagging and gasping as his face contorts from the agonizing lack of oxygen, prompting his subordinates to watch in silent disbelief at their leader's pathetic state. As Sophia and the others witness the terrifying extent of Ainz's absolute authority, until Ainz finally snaps his fingers to permit the simple act of breathing once more, causing the villain to collapse forward while heaving and panting for air, before the desperate man screams at his thugs to kill Ainz for a massive reward, spurring the hooded mercenaries to draw their weapons and charge at the legendary mage, who responds with a dark grin and a promise to show them real sorcery, activating a limiter release for his miraculous right arm as the attackers close in, channeling immense power into his hand as the magical pressure begins to build, displaying a gaze filled with overwhelming might that paralyzes anyone who sees it, clenching his fingers into a tight fist as the air around him begins to warp, releasing a devastating surge of energy that ripples outward from his concentrated strike, resulting in the simultaneous and violent decimation of the entire group of charging thugs, leaving the antagonist to stare blankly as he is splattered by the remains of his men, who remains frozen in a state of catatonic shock from the sheer scale of the slaughter, while Ainz stands victorious amidst the sudden and absolute silence of the battlefield. Ainz stands amidst the fallen bodies of the thugs, while Sophia and her group watch from the distance. Sophia and Leica remain rooted to the spot, their faces pale with shock at the sudden carnage. The antagonist stares with wide, trembling eyes as he struggles to comprehend the sheer power gap. Screaming in a frantic panic, the villain demands to know what kind of impossible magic was used. Ainz steps toward him while explaining that his sorcery transcends the boundaries of the physical world. Holding out his hand, the legendary mage mockingly addresses the trembling man as a clever little child. The defeated sorcerer cringes back in utter terror, desperately begging for Ainz to stay away. Sophia quickly shouts out, pleading for Ainz to spare the man so they can interrogate him. Casting a cold glance back, Ainz reminds her that a duel is always a matter of survival. He places his palm on the man's head while the villain whimpers in anticipation of his death. Sophia watches with a worried expression as Leica prepares to step in and offer a suggestion. Leica calmly calls out to Ainz, asking him to pause his final strike for a better purpose. Sophia turns her attention toward the noblewoman, curious about the plan she is about to propose. Leica suggests that presenting this criminal to the royal family would secure them significant political influence. Realizing the benefits, Sophia excitedly agrees that a gift would help them with the royalty. Ainz falls silent for a moment as he weighs the strategic value of keeping the man alive. Eventually agreeing to the plan, he leaves the fate of the captive in Leica's capable hands. Ainz looks down at his prisoner and invokes a command of prohibited matter to force slumber. The antagonist's eyes flutter shut as he drifts into a deep and magically enforced unconsciousness. Soon after, the group continues their journey as a pair of carriages rolls along the peaceful countryside path. Inside the carriage, Leica kindly offers to host a meal once they reach her family estate. Ainz accepts the offer while teasingly suggesting that Sophia is probably quite poor at cooking. The noblewoman laughs as she reminds her friend about Gauss's blunt comments regarding her social life. Sophia becomes defensive, explaining that her complete devotion to the sword left no room for domestic skills. Boasting slightly, the warrior claims her culinary skills are at least equal to an average person's. She determinedly argues that her mastery of the blade should easily translate to using kitchen knives. Leica shifts the conversation back to Ainz, admitting that his overwhelming sorcery was truly terrifying to behold. Smiling with quiet pride, the legendary mage acknowledges that he remains highly confident in his vast abilities. Sophia wonders aloud if their previous enemy used true magic, defining it as a natural phenomenon. Ainz clarifies the difference by stating that sorcery is an art that transcends the laws of nature. Questioning her current path, the mage asks Sophia why a swordsman is so interested in academic study. Sophia reveals her dream of becoming a magic user, despite her current training with a physical blade. The conversation turns toward her upcoming entrance exam at the academy, where Leica's noble status carries weight. Outside, the carriage continues to roll across the countryside, while they discuss the power of noble connections. A sudden jolt from the uneven road causes the passengers to lurch forward in momentary surprise. Quickly recovering her composure, Sophia turns her attention toward a lingering question for her powerful mentor. She asks about the welfare of the youth they encountered during their recent travels. The warrior waits with bated breath for an update on the child's recovery from the ordeal. Ainz offers a small smile while assuring the group that they are safe and doing well. He concludes the discussion by noting that Riet possesses absolutely no talent for the magical arts. Ainz casually mentions that he took the initiative to teach the young boy sorcery. Hearing this unexpected revelation, Leica stares back at him with wide, disbelieving eyes. Sophia mirrors this shock, her expression turning into one of utter bewilderment. The legendary mage explains a technique called charity by plunder that heals through stolen power. The warrior struggles to process the idea of such a small child becoming a sorcerer. She suddenly realizes that the man before her is powerful enough to create new sorcerers. Meanwhile, the driver calls out to inform the passengers they are nearing the Kirk Gateway. Both women look toward the window in anticipation as they reach their destination. The carriage rolls toward a massive stone fortification guarded by towering walls and flags. As they approach the checkpoint, Leica asks her companions if they have their identification papers. While Sophia presents hers easily, Ainz awkwardly admits that he lacks any official documentation. The noblewoman quickly dismisses the concern, confident that her family's crest will ensure their passage. The horses trot through the open gate under the watchful eyes of the station guards. The driver offers a polite word of thanks as the guards signal them to continue. Leica beams with satisfaction, boasting about how simple it is to bypass such formalities. Ainz leans back and quietly observes how conveniently things seem to go for the nobility. Suddenly, something in the environment catches the sorcerer's attention and causes him to pause. He fixes his gaze intently on the scene unfolding outside the carriage window. The vehicle emerges into a sprawling, busy city square, crowded with pedestrians and tall architecture. A sea of citizens fills the streets as the carriage makes its way through the bustling crowd. A charismatic orator gestures broadly while addressing a dense crowd in the public square. He wears a self-assured grin as he finishes his announcement to the gathered citizens. Ainz and his companions overlook the vast expanse of the city from their carriage. The sorcerer's focused gaze remains fixed on the sprawling urban landscape before him. He lets out a gasp of genuine amazement at the sheer scale of the civilization. Leica turns toward them with a proud smile to announce they have finally arrived. The royal capital of Kirk stretches out toward the horizon with countless buildings and a distant castle. The carriage eventually pulls into the courtyard of a massive and elegantly lit estate. Several uniformed maids bow deeply as they welcome the noblewoman back to her residence. The moon hangs high over the magnificent architecture of the Brandy family's secondary mansion. Leica instructs her staff to prepare a grand meal for the two people who saved her. They step into a lavish entrance hall featuring a towering ceiling and a wide marble staircase. Sophia quietly comments on the vanity of the nobility, while Leica looks on with a sweat drop. Ainz sits stunned at the dining table as he views the extravagant gourmet dishes served. The spread features an array of high-quality meats, breads, and fine wine for the guests. Everyone takes their seats at the long table while waiting for the master of the house. A sudden thundering sound of rapid footsteps interrupts the quiet atmosphere of the dining room. A man with a sharp mustache bursts through the doorway with a frantic expression on his face. He immediately rushes toward Leica to confirm that his daughter has returned home unharmed. The worried father pulls her into a crushing hug while expressing his overwhelming relief. Leica introduces the two travelers to her father as the brave souls who saved her life, pointing toward Ainz while explaining that he is a talented sorcerer despite his delicate appearance. She then gestures to Sophia and proudly reveals her status as a noble knight. The father narrows his eyes in contemplation as he processes the information about their mysterious guests. He sets his concerns aside and warmly invites everyone to feast upon the banquet prepared for them. Ainz looks down at the elaborate spread but hesitates to pick up his utensils. The sorcerer explains his predicament regarding his missing limb, while the host listens intently. Leica cheerfully suggests that he use his magical abilities to resolve the minor dining inconvenience. Ainz reluctantly performs a limit release to manifest a shimmering magical right arm before the stunned noble. He sighs at the absurdity of using legendary sorcery just to manage a dinner plate. The traveler finally takes a bite of the gourmet dish with a curious expression. He chews slowly as the complex flavors of the modern era begin to sink in. Tears suddenly stream down his face as he weeps over the magnificent culinary progress of the world. Leica's father remains frozen in shock while watching the sorcerer's intense emotional reaction to the meal. Sophia calmly confirms to the host that the ethereal limb is indeed a product of Ainz's magic. The noble mumbles under his breath about the rare technique he just witnessed with his own eyes. A dark silhouette of a legendary witch flickers through his mind as he compares the two powers. Leica interrupts his thoughts by excitedly recounting the details of the dangerous encounter in the woods. She uses dramatic sound effects to describe the battle, while Ainz focuses purely on his food. The father grips his knife and offers a final sincere thanks for capturing the notorious criminal. Leica's father suggests that Ainz should visit the castle tomorrow to provide an explanation to the king. Ainz mumbles the king's title under his breath, while his companions look on with varied expressions. The host offers to accompany them to ensure their lack of courtly etiquette does not cause trouble. Darkness settles over the grand estate as the group concludes their meal and heads toward their rooms. Ainz retreats to a private bathroom and sighs deeply, while reflecting on his incredibly busy first day. He sinks into the warm water of a bath while marveling at the evolution of Tass Village. Leaning back comfortably, the sorcerer wonders what his old acquaintances Evan and Silica are doing right now. In another room, Leica's father thoughtfully stirs his tea while dwelling on Sophia's claim of servitude. Sophia maintains her composure and sips her drink as the noble continues to scrutinize their mysterious backgrounds. He mentions that only the legendary Ainz could command the loyalty of the Silver Snow Knights. The noble leans in close and points out that the sorcerer's death was never officially confirmed. Sophia freezes in mid-sip as the weight of the father's suspicions finally begins to dawn on her. The host insists that they must uncover the full truth before determining their next course of action. A bright morning sun soon rises over the horizon and bathes the entire mansion in light. Ainz notices a small but persistent ink stain on the white fabric of his sleeve. He prepares to use a localized magic spell to cleanse the blemish from his fine clothing. Swirling mana gathers around his arm as the restoration magic begins to strip away the dirt. A brilliant flash of light signals the completion of his minor but precise magical cleaning task. Sitting alone on a staircase, Ainz inspects his restored garment and feels satisfied with the outcome. He looks around the quiet hallway and wonders why he is the only one awake this morning. Leica gracefully twirls in a voluminous dress on the staircase, while Ainz watches from a step below. Ainz offers a warm smile and compares her elegant appearance to that of a mythical forest fairy. A voice from the top of the stairs apologizes for keeping the group waiting this morning. Sophia steps into view, wearing a stunning white ensemble that leaves her companions breathless with admiration. Mesmerized by her radiant aura, Ainz notices a refreshing scent and the brilliant shine of her hair. The group gathers together as Ainz self-consciously adjusts his hair and wonders if he should have groomed more. Leica's father takes charge and officially announces that it is time for them to depart for the castle. A magnificent view of the royal fortress appears as it stands proudly against a backdrop of snowy peaks. The grand scale of the king's residence becomes apparent as the party approaches the formidable stone entrance. Lush garden plants line the outer perimeter of the castle grounds as the morning sun climbs higher. Inside the opulent throne room, a stern guard commands the group to kneel before the impending monarch. Leica's father leans over to whisper a quick instruction for Ainz to mimic his formal courtly movements. Bowing his head low, the sorcerer reflects on how much he feels like a knight in this setting. Absolute silence fills the chamber as the group remains perfectly still upon the long ceremonial carpet. Ainz keeps his eyes shut and focuses on maintaining his respectful posture while waiting for the king. The reigning monarch finally sits upon the ornate throne while draped in heavy robes of state. A powerful voice echoes through the hall and commands Marquis Kansas Brandy II to raise his head. The noble remains momentarily motionless as he prepares to address the ruler of the kingdom. A high-ranking royal guard watches the proceedings with a sharp and unwavering gaze from the side. Responding to the command, Laika's father acknowledges the king and prepares to begin their formal audience. Ainz quietly acknowledges the flow of the ceremony while maintaining his respectful bow. The king speaks with a deep voice and commands the guests to raise their heads. Laika's father complies and faces the monarch with a look of unwavering loyalty. Sophia stands composed and waits for the formal introduction to proceed. Standing nearby, Laika watches the interaction with a calm and focused expression. Ainz lifts his gaze and observes the powerful figure seated upon the throne. The entire group stands before the sovereign in the vast and silent throne room. A faint smile plays on Laika's lips as the atmosphere becomes slightly more relaxed. The king shares a brief look with his closest guard while addressing his visitors. Marquis Brandy takes a solemn moment to prepare his response to the king's greeting. The monarch expresses his pleasure at seeing the Brandy family again after many years. Responding with grace, the Marquis recounts the difficult struggles of their recent journey. The king's face softens as he notes how much Laika has matured since her childhood. She reacts with a cheerful and modest smile to the king's warm observations. Sophia feels a sense of ease seeing the kind relationship between the families. Shifting the focus, the king mentions the official report about the captured high-profile target. Ainz thinks to himself how much more amicable the king is than he had imagined. His mind drifts toward the structural layout of the room as the conversation continues. Something else about the grand chamber begins to pique the sorcerer's intense curiosity. He focuses his gaze on the vast hall to understand its hidden architectural secrets. Ainz senses a strange magical energy drifting through the air of the throne room, deducing that the presence of this mana is an intentional and artificial construct. Oblivious to this, the Marquis details how the enemy was defeated without a single counterattack. The king leans in with intense curiosity and demands to hear the story firsthand. He shifts his gaze toward Ainz and asks for the identity of the mysterious youth. Staying silent, the sorcerer continues to examine his surroundings while the room falls quiet. A stern royal guard intervenes and commands Ainz to answer the king's question immediately. The Marquis glances back with a look of pure panic at the youth's lack of response. Laika whispers his name in a desperate attempt to snap him out of his reverie. Ainz finally offers a small smile while keeping his eyes fixed on the floor. He suddenly crouches low to investigate a strange detail hidden within the floor tiles, casually asking Sophia to handle the explanations. He ignores the mounting tension in the room. The Marquis is visibly shaken by the sheer audacity of such an informal display. The knight captain's face twists into a scowl of pure disbelief at the sorcerer's actions. Laika can only watch in silence as she breaks out into a cold sweat. Sophia stares ahead with wide-eyed shock as the responsibility for the introduction is thrust upon her. A nearby observer trembles with anxiety while witnessing the unprecedented breach of royal protocol. Bewildered attendants exchange looks of confusion as the young man remains focused on the ground. Rather than taking offense, the king closes his eyes and lets out a soft laugh. The monarch laughs heartily and acknowledges the name of Ainz while comparing him to a witch. The Marquis breaks into a cold sweat while feeling immensely relieved that the king laughed off the disrespect. Stepping forward to bridge the awkward gap, Sophia formally introduces herself as a member of the Knight Order. The king listens with a curious expression, questioning why someone of her rank is accompanying the mysterious youth. Ainz suddenly points toward the royal seat and declares his desire to sit upon the throne. A heavy silence falls over the monarch as he stares back with a stunned and hollow expression. The Marquis looks on in absolute terror while realizing the gravity of the youth's treasonous request. Laika watches with wide eyes, her face paling at the sudden and dangerous shift in the atmosphere. Sophia freezes in place, completely overwhelmed by the audacity of her companion's blunt demand. A young attendant gasps in horror while clutching her hands together in a desperate plea for peace. The Marquis finally finds his voice and lets out a frantic shout of disbelief at the situation. Another noble watches the unfolding catastrophe with a grim expression of growing concern. The knight captain loses his composure entirely and bellows that he will no longer tolerate such insolence. Sensing a disaster, the king tries to interject by reminding the captain of the youth's previous merits. The captain ignores the command and charges forward while accusing Ainz of planning an open rebellion. Sophia steals her resolve and prepares to intervene, as the knight draws closer with aggressive intent. She blocks the captain's path and commands him to stand down to fulfill her duty to her master. The king reacts with visible shock after hearing Sophia refer to the young sorcerer as her lord. Leica turns to the boy in a panic and begs him to come to his senses immediately. Ainz offers a calm explanation, while clarifying that he is actually interested in the room's magical construction. The king narrows his eyes and focuses intently on the youth while processing this revelation. Lieselot reflects on how being summoned so early has disrupted her valuable morning rest. As she sits before a mirror, her personal maid hurriedly prepares her for the royal meeting. The noblewoman stands up with a graceful flourish, while her long dress sweeps the floor. A sudden surge of energy or movement suggests she is ready to depart for the hall. She fans herself with a confident smirk while asserting that her timing is perfect. Walking down the long palace corridor, the maid reminds her that the audience has already begun. Lieselotte lets out a tired yawn while clearly feeling bored by the formal palace procedures. She stops briefly to demand a glass of wine to settle her nerves before entering. Her request causes the maid to boil over with suppressed rage at the constant delays. Despite the maid's obvious irritation, the noblewoman laughs off the tension and urges her to hurry. She muses to herself about the entertainment value of teasing those with immature spirits. Peering over her fan with a sharp gaze, she focuses her attention on the throne room door. She finally steps into the grand hall just as the atmosphere reaches a breaking point. Ainz continues to stand his ground with a curious smile, while the knights remain on edge. The captain bellows about the importance of loyalty to the kingdom while losing his temper. A chilling silence follows as Ainz questions the very concept of loyalty to a mortal nation. He boldly clarifies that his only true devotion is to the pursuit of magical mastery. The captain prepares to strike in a fit of rage at such an outrageous declaration. Suddenly stepping forward, Lieslot interjects and warns the knight that he is no match for the boy. The captain's face contorts with frustration as he is forced to halt his advance by her authority. Ainz remains silent as he observes the tense atmosphere of the throne room. The king gazes down from his seat while expressing his growing impatience with the delay. Lieselot stands tall in her elegant attire while sensing a profound magical resonance within the boy. A blinding flash of white energy suddenly erupts and consumes the entire grand hall. Ainz maneuvers with supernatural speed through the radiant light as he tests his power. The captain breaks into a cold sweat while witnessing the raw display of ancient sorcery. Stunned into silence, the king stares ahead with wide eyes at the impossible spectacle. Nearby onlookers clutch their faces in disbelief at the sheer pressure filling the room. Confused whispers ripple through the crowd as the magical intensity begins to subside. Ainz wears a confident smirk while inviting his opponents to reveal their own magical capabilities. Lieslota clenches her fan tightly as she expresses her irritation at the boy's audacity. She lowers her gaze while pondering the implications of such a legendary presence. Ainz reaches out with a puzzled look, as if disappointed that the excitement ended so quickly. Turning toward the king, the noblewoman confirms that the boy is indeed a genuine sorcerer. Her expression darkens with a mix of resentment and professional recognition of his talent. The captain remains trembling while receiving a sharp gaze from the high-ranking noblewoman. The official bows deeply in a show of absolute submission as Lieselotte prepares to exit. She pauses to remark on how much the man has changed since he was a mere child. The man offers a strange smile while acknowledging the wisdom of her previous lessons. The official bows his head in silence while accepting the gravity of the situation. The king dismisses the noblewoman as she strides gracefully toward the exit of the hall. Ainz appears momentarily bewildered by the sudden shift in the room's dynamic. Voices discuss the validation of his magical status and the strategic role of the noblewoman. Resting his chin on his hand, the king contemplates an appropriate reward for the young sorcerer. He explains that he cannot directly interfere with the autonomous territory surrounding Ainz's domain. The official requests permission to act as a mediator for future diplomatic negotiations. He continues to present his case while seeking the monarch's formal approval for the task. The king observes him with a piercing gaze while weighing the benefits of such an arrangement. A man nearby remains quiet while carefully adjusting his formal attire. He looks up with a resolute expression to signal his readiness for the coming changes. Closing his eyes, the king finally gives his consent to the proposed plan. The decree is officially announced to the gathered audience within the grand chamber. Ainz stands among the nobles while appearing largely indifferent to the political maneuvering. Laughter echoes from the castle walls as the conversation shifts to the boy's strange nature. The noblewoman swirls her wine while preparing to reveal the truth about her guest. Seated around a table, the group listens intently as the king inquires about the boy's origin. She identifies him as the legendary sorcerer of Silver Snow, and author of the ancient texts. The revelation strikes the men with a wave of absolute shock and disbelief. She gazes at her glass while reflecting on the master who was once sealed away within the forest. A wine glass shatters as the group processes the terrifying identity of the boy. They realize a new era of magic is beginning and fear the consequences. The legendary silhouette of the ancient god looms large in their collective imagination. Horses pull carriages through the city streets as the group departs from the palace. The official remains shaken by the young sorcerer's overwhelming and unpredictable presence. He trembles while recalling the chilling atmosphere that filled the royal chamber. Ainz hangs his head while enduring a persistent and seemingly endless lecture. Nearby, his companion falls into a deep and peaceful sleep despite the tension. Sophia remains perfectly still and silent, with her eyes firmly shut. His mind drifts toward memories of the village and those he has yet to meet. A fiery vision of an angry girl scolding him flashes through his thoughts. He panics as the imagined lecture becomes too much for him to handle. The group finally arrives at a grand estate where the maids offer a warm welcome. One maid stops in her tracks while reacting with visible surprise to their arrival. Noticing their exhaustion, she quickly suggests serving something sweet to restore their energy. The official clears his throat to regain his professional composure during the transition. He inquires about the young sorcerer's plans to remain within the capital city. A generous invitation is extended to use the luxurious mansion as a temporary base. Ainz beams with genuine excitement at the prospect of free food and lodging. He expresses his sincere gratitude while standing beneath the glow of a massive chandelier. Ainz strolls through the city while admiring the beautiful local architecture. He looks up at the sky with a satisfied and relaxed expression. The young sorcerer wanders through the market to sample the local cuisine. Rows of houses with tall chimneys line the quiet city streets. He hums a happy tune while soaking in a luxurious bubble bath. The afternoon sun shines through the window as he sleeps in late. A grand mansion stands prominently behind a field of blooming flowers. Birds fly over the estate while flower petals dance in the wind. Ainz sits at a long dining table under a massive crystal chandelier. He grimaces and sweats after taking a sip of the bitter tea. Deep in thought, he questions if he has become too lazy lately. The maid stands nearby with a flat and slightly unimpressed look. He turns his attention toward her to ask about his companion's locations. She informs him that they are currently practicing their swordsmanship outside. An idea strikes him and he shouts out with sudden and intense energy. He quickly rushes out of the room to join the others. The vast garden becomes a training ground for the practicing warriors. A young woman lunges forward with a sharp and determined cry. The practice swords clash together with a powerful and echoing sound. Sophia demonstrates her superior skills with a swift and decisive movement. Leica pants heavily while gripping her sword after a grueling training session. A sharp grunt echoes through the air as the force of the blow takes its toll. The wooden practice sword slips from her grasp and tumbles into the grass. She collapses in exhaustion while Sophia remains perfectly poised and ready. Smiling gently, the knight offers advice on technique to her winded pupil. The determined student begs for one more round despite her obvious fatigue. Sophia refuses and insists they take a break to avoid developing poor form. Her attention shifts when she notices a familiar presence approaching them. Ainz greets everyone with a bright wave as he enters the training area. He exchanges playful banter with the group while trying to act cool. Sophia erupts with a hilariously intense expression to defend his noble reputation. The young trainee rests her sword on her shoulder while watching the sorcerer. Turning her gaze toward him, Sophia addresses her master with deep respect. She requests a demonstration on how to weave magic into swordplay. His eyes light up with sudden excitement at the chance to teach. The sorcerer decides to borrow a sword to provide a proper visual lesson. He grips the hilt firmly while preparing to explain his unique philosophy. He first questions Leica about her own understanding of magical foundations. She struggles to articulate the complex theory of mana manipulation. The core principles of spellcasting are laid out as the lesson begins. Ainz explains to Sophia and Rista that mana manipulation is divided into internal and external operations. Sophia listens intently while absorbing the explanation of how internal mana flows through the body. The sorcerer holds up a small potion bottle to illustrate how healing magic works internally. Sophia recalls a physical sensation from her past experiences while trying to grasp the concept. Ainz confirms that the feeling she described was indeed her own mana manifesting within her. Sophia closes her eyes and focuses deeply on the internal energy circulating through her limbs. She stands perfectly still as a faint aura begins to radiate from her concentrated form. Opening her eyes with a sharp look, the knight confirms she can feel the flow. The sorcerer claps his hands with delight while praising her quick mastery of body reinforcement. Rista interrupts with a worried expression, questioning why she cannot perform the same feat yet. Ainz explains with a smile that Leica hasn't yet fully grasped how to move her body. He visualizes a translucent diagram of a human body to show the complexity of muscle control. Rista listens with a conflicted look while Sophia stands by with unwavering focus. The master instructs his knight to use her full body reinforcement for an upcoming practical test. He narrows his eyes with a serious gaze while preparing to increase the training distance. Sophia nods in agreement as she prepares for a more intense level of combat practice. Turning to the side, the sorcerer warns Rista to step back for her own safety. A maid standing nearby with a tea set looks on with a surprised and wide-eyed expression. Rista stares blankly in shock as she realizes the sheer scale of the upcoming demonstration. The two powerful warriors face each other across a vast field as the battle begins. Rista and the maid gasp in disbelief at the extreme distance set for the duel. Ainz stands composed and invites his opponent to begin whenever she is ready. Facing her master from across the field, Sophia grips her blade and prepares to strike. The knight lowers her head in deep concentration as she gathers her internal mana. With a sharp glare, she announces her move and commits fully to the attack. Sophia vanishes into a blur of motion as she propels herself forward with explosive speed. Ainz remains steady as his student closes the massive gap in a single heartbeat. Rista watches with wide eyes, unable to process the sheer velocity of the charge. A violent shock wave erupts as Sophia's initial strike meets her master's defensive stance. The knight pauses for a moment to observe the effect of her reinforced movement. The spectators remain frozen in awe at the power displayed in such a short time. Ainz inquires if she has finally grasped the feeling of mana-enhanced speed. Wearing a confident smirk, the sorcerer warns her that he is now taking the offensive. He unleashes a barrage of rapid strikes that force Sophia back on her heels. The knight desperately parries the incoming flurry as sparks fly from their clashing weapons. Bone-like projectiles scatter through the air as the two warriors trade relentless blows. From the sidelines, the girls witness a series of massive explosions tearing up the earth. Thick clouds of dust and debris fill the atmosphere as the training reaches a fever pitch. The sheer force of their collision shatters nearby tea sets and sends shards flying. Rose petals and fragments of bone settle on the torn ground as the clash concludes. Rista peers through the settling dust and asks the maid if she can still see the combatants. The attendant remains silent while staring intensely at the aftermath of the devastating battle. The full scale of the destruction is revealed as a massive crater dominates the training grounds. Jagged cracks spiderweb across the shattered earth where the two warriors recently stood. Small fragments of stone and dust continue to drift through the stagnant air. Sophia stands amidst the ruins with a look of pure shock and exhaustion on her face. Ainz appears similarly strained as he takes a moment to recover from the intense exchange. The Duke approaches the scene and comments on how well the soil has been tilled. Everyone gathers around while the Lord humorously plans to plant vegetables in the devastated garden. 2 weeks remain until the Magic Academy entrance exam. As Sophia continues her rigorous training, the senior knight provides harsh instruction to help Sophia refine her movements and focus. Ainz explains the fundamental principles of magic circles and the true purpose of chanting. Listening intently, Sophia hardens her resolve to master the complex concepts being taught. She pushes her body to the limit by practicing her high-speed maneuvers repeatedly. Beads of sweat pour down her face as she grinds through the grueling daily sessions. Later that evening, the Duke sits at the dinner table expressing his anxiety over the trial. Ainz admits his ignorance regarding the standards of modern magic schools during the meal. The father clenches his hands together in a display of nervous anticipation for his daughter. Sophia brightly assures her parent that everything will be fine while showing off her spirit. The sorcerer then asks if he may accompany them to the academy for the upcoming exam. The Duke mentions that a noble of certain rank is allowed to bring a single attendant. Sophia gleefully orders Ainz to follow her lead since he will be serving her. She jokingly suggests that he might even have to clean her boots upon command. The duo shares a moment of lighthearted banter while preparing for the trip. Back at the mansion, Rista reacts with tearful despair upon learning she must stay behind. The day of the entrance exam finally arrives as Sophia marvels at the academy's scale. The vast and ornate campus of the magic institution stretches out before the incoming students. Observing the massive crowd, the group realizes just how many commoners are also applying. A familiar voice suddenly calls out to Sophia, catching her completely off guard. Kirishia approaches with a bright smile, while accompanied by her own professional-looking attendant. The two friends joyfully reunite in the courtyard as they prepare for the coming trials. Kirishia's attendant, Seidel, offers a polite greeting while standing dutifully by his mistress's side. Introductions are made as Sophia presents Ainz to the princess and her companion. They discuss the surprising news of Ainz being officially recognized by the powerful Lieselot. Ainz humbly maintains that he is merely there to observe the school as an attendant. Kirishia explains her situation with an expression of mild concern before the ceremony begins. A sudden loud voice grabs everyone's attention as the orientation officially starts. An academy official uses a magical megaphone to direct the examinees toward the written test. Fascinated by the modern magic tool, Ainz examines the amplification device from a distance. Sophia waves a final farewell to her sorcerer companion before heading into the exam hall. An overhead view shows candidates taking their places at rows of wooden desks in the courtyard. Seidel leads the way as he invites Ainz to follow him toward the attendants' seating area. A boisterous man makes a scene by loudly proclaiming his service to the prominent Sobi family. Seidel adjusts his glasses while warning Ainz to avoid the arrogant and troublesome individual. The academy official raises a magical megaphone to announce the start of the written examination. Silence falls across the vast courtyard as students begin working on their test papers simultaneously. Sophia maintains a focused expression while carefully reviewing the questions presented on her desk. While waiting, Seidel explains the four main subjects being tested to an inquisitive Ainz. Ainz reflects on the importance of magic knowledge in the modern curriculum. With a thoughtful look, curiosity piqued, the sorcerer asks if it is possible to view the examination questions himself. Seidel politely requests a moment while he goes to fetch a copy of the test paper. Receiving the document, Ainz offers a small smile before diving into the academic material. His expression quickly shifts to one of skepticism as he evaluates the depth of the questions. Ainz voices his disappointment, noting that the simple megaphone is more magically impressive than the test. The two men share a casual conversation about the various magical tools found throughout the campus. A sense of unease flickers in Ainz's eyes as he ponders the current state of sorcery. Looking out over the Grand Academy, he contemplates how much the world has changed since his time. The proctor bellows into his device to signal that the time for writing has officially ended. Sophia lets out a long breath of relief while other students complain about the difficult time limit. Ainz approaches with a cheerful wave to congratulate his companion on completing the first trial. Kirishia approaches the group and asks Ainz to speak with her more casually. Ainz reacts with a flustered expression as the princess insists on dropping all formal titles between them. The conversation is suddenly interrupted by the arrival of an arrogant young man named Darius and his attendant. Darius recognizes Sophia and remarks on seeing her again since their last encounter at a social gathering. Sophia looks visibly uncomfortable as she recalls the unpleasant meeting with the boastful noble. With a condescending smirk, Darius questions whether Sophia is truly planning to take the difficult entrance examination. Sophia glares back at him, retorting that they are the same age and she is perfectly capable of competing. The noble laughs off her determination, suggesting she should have stayed home to manage her family's wheat fields. Standing tall, Sophia introduces Ainz and proudly claims that he has been teaching her everything she knows. Darius pauses for a moment before letting out a strange, high-pitched giggle at her revelation. He quickly descends into a fit of mocking laughter, finding it hilarious that a mere commoner is Sophia's teacher. A tense silence follows the outburst as the noble's companions look on with varying degrees of amusement. The atmosphere continues to sour while the two groups stare each other down in the middle of the path. Sophia boldly asserts that Ainz's skills far surpass those of any mediocre knight candidate currently in attendance. The tall warrior narrows his eyes in a sharp glare, clearly taking offense at the young woman's words. He steps forward to challenge her statement, insulted that she would compare his mastery to that of a stranger. Sophia maintains her ground despite the physical intimidation, her eyes flashing with a sense of protective loyalty. Losing his temper, the attendant shouts a demand for an immediate duel to prove his combat superiority. A stern voice suddenly commands the group to stop, cutting through the heated confrontation with absolute authority. Prince Haral arrives on the scene, silhouetted against the light as he puts an end to the petty squabble. Kirishia looks up in surprise as she recognizes the authoritative figure approaching the group. Prince Haral towers over the scene, his presence immediately cooling the heated tempers of the candidates. He calmly proposes that Darius settle the dispute through a proper match after the exam. Agreeing with a confident smirk, Darius accepts the condition and looks forward to the confrontation. The prince then turns his attention toward Ainz, seeking his consent for the delayed duel. Ainz remains composed while agreeing to the terms. Though Sophia continues to express her annoyance, clapping his hands together, Harald declares the matter settled and orders everyone to disperse. Darius and his subordinate retreat into the distance while shouting final insults over their shoulders. A heavy silence lingers as the group watches their rivals disappear into the training grounds. The scene shifts to a quiet moment where a fresh sandwich and coffee are served. Steam rises from the hot beverage during a much-needed break from the morning's intense drama. Sitting together at an outdoor table, the companions enjoy their lunch and regain their composure. Carisha breaks the silence by asking about the specific martial titles mentioned by the arrogant noble. An attendant explains the hierarchy of swordsmanship ranks used within the Garan Empire's military system. Ainz listens with a weary expression, clearly disinterested in the complex social standing of warriors. Sophia encourages him with a bright smile, suggesting he simply forget about the unpleasant encounter. Focusing on the task ahead, Ainz takes a sip of his coffee while contemplating the next test. The group moves toward the large training field where candidates gather for the practical magic examination. A young student begins the assessment by attempting to chant a spell under the examiner's gaze. The candidate focuses all their energy into manifesting a small spark of magic for the official grading. A student struggles to stabilize a small orb of magic while reciting a formula, while another candidate loses control and falls backward after a failed incantation. Observing the subpar performances, Ainz stares blankly as he begins to realize something. The observers nearby comment on the lack of exceptional talent among the current examinees. A brief moment of quiet contemplation follows as the next candidate's name is called. Ainz realizes with a sweat that his training might have been far too extreme. Stepping forward with infectious enthusiasm, Leica responds to her summon with a loud shout. The examiners instruct her to demonstrate basic elemental magic by forming simple spheres. Some arrogant students in the crowd laugh and mock her seemingly plain appearance. Ignoring the chatter, Leica confidently extends her arm to begin the practical demonstration. Without a single word, she manifests a massive fireball that illuminates the entire field. A nearby student gapes in shock at the overwhelming heat and size of the flame. Spectators watch with wide eyes as the brilliance of the fire outshines everything else. Murmurs ripple through the crowd as people realize they didn't hear any incantation. An intimidated warrior watches the spectacle while cold sweat beads down his face. The examiners reel in total shock at the sight of such high-level silent casting. One judge adjusts his glasses in disbelief while trying to maintain his professional composure. The entire panel of experts remains frozen in silence by the unprecedented magical output. Unfazed by the commotion, Leica cheerfully announces her intention to cast the second element. She effortlessly conjures a colossal sphere of water that leaves the judges completely speechless. Spectators mutter in confusion, wondering about the identity of the girl who just performed silent casting. One examiner leans forward and asks if she can demonstrate a mid-level spell like Fire Lance. Leica beams with a confident smile and readily agrees to the much harder request. She takes a deep, steadying breath while centering her focus for the next display. Concentrating intensely, she prepares to execute a technique that drastically shortens the required incantation. The judges break into a cold sweat as they realize she is attempting graduate-level magic. With a sudden thrust of her arm, she unleashes a concentrated spear of roaring flames. A nearby judge stands paralyzed with his mouth agape at the terrifyingly precise magical control. In the audience, a young student watches with sparkling eyes, captivated by the brilliant display. Other spectators can only stare in mute horror as the heat from the spell washes over them. The fire lance streaks across the training grounds, leaving a trail of blinding light and smoke. Firmly grounded, Leica maintains her stance while the residual mana crackles around her. Ainz watches awkwardly from the side while the lead examiner screams in absolute shock. A stern-faced student narrows his eyes, clearly shaken by the massive gap in their abilities. Another candidate grits his teeth in frustration, unable to comprehend such a monstrous level of talent. As the smoke clears, Leica stands proudly while the crowd erupts into a frenzied buzz. The examiner with glasses shouts his amazement, his professional mask completely shattered by the performance. Ainz casually explains his training methods to the frantic judge, who listens with disbelief. Wiping sweat from his brow, the head examiner tentatively asks if she knows any high-level spells. Leica gives an enthusiastic nod, ready to show everyone the true extent of her power. Leica apologizes to the group, explaining that she is prohibited from using high-level magic for now. The examiners exchange bewildered glances, completely taken aback by her unexpected refusal to demonstrate more. Despite the late official's encouragement to try just once, she remains firm in her humble decision. Relenting, the examiner asks her to instead perform whatever spell she feels most comfortable using. She lets out a joyful shout while executing a simplified version of the Fire Lance spell. Watching with starry eyes, a fellow student gushes over the girl's incredible and natural talent. Nearby, another young woman watches intently while sweat beads on her forehead from the intensity. A sophisticated man in a suit observes the scene from afar with a quiet, knowing gaze. He considers the impressive results of the training that Ainz has provided to his young student. The narrative focus shifts across the bustling training grounds as students prepare for the next phase. Wooden practice swords clash sharply as the physical combat portion of the entrance exam begins. Officials diligently take notes on their clipboards while monitoring the technique of each hopeful candidate. Sitting on the sidelines, Leica smiles cheerfully while holding her own wooden practice weapon. As the sun begins to set over the academy, the long day of testing finally concludes. Ainz hangs his head and sighs, feeling completely drained by the bothersome nature of the day. He walks across the open courtyard while his companions follow him toward the next destination. A blonde-haired official begins explaining the strict regulations for the upcoming duel with Talaj. Standing before a rack of training swords, Talaj prepares himself for the impending trial of strength. The challenger listens to the final instructions, confirming that the match will be a non-lethal encounter. With a steady gait, Talaj approaches the weapon rack to select a blade for the fight. Gripping the handle firmly, Talaj lifts a heavy practice sword from the rack. As the blonde official warns both parties to maintain safety during the sparring session, Talaj points his blade forward and mockingly tells Ainz to watch his single arm. Standing perfectly still, the sorcerer faces his opponent without showing a hint of concern. Nearby, Leica trembles with worry while watching the intimidating man prepare to strike. Talaj scowls with irritation as he waits for the signal to begin the match. Narrowing his eyes, Ainz remains silent and focused as the tension in the arena rises. The referee raises his hand and calls for the combatants to take their stances. Suddenly, the large man lunges forward with incredible speed to initiate the first blow. He lets out a thunderous roar while swinging his massive wooden blade downward. Ainz shifts his weight slightly to parry the heavy strike with effortless grace. Looking almost bored, the sorcerer observes the predictable trajectory of the follow-up attack. Talaj widens his eyes in surprise as his powerful swing misses its intended mark. The sounds of clashing wood echo through the courtyard as the two exchange rapid strikes. Gritting his teeth, the challenger readjusts his grip to deliver a more decisive blow. He unleashes a sweeping horizontal arc that forces Ainz to step back momentarily. Watching from the sidelines, the companions whisper about whether Ainz is being pushed back. The glasses-wearing observer notes that the sorcerer is actually using the minimum movement necessary. Another witness realizes that Ainz is likely holding back because he finds the duel tedious. Talaj eventually stops and admits that the man before him is no mere amateur. Talaj flashes a confident smirk while announcing his intent to demonstrate his true power. He adjusts his grip on the hilt to prepare for a devastating single-handed maneuver. The bespectacled official watches in disbelief as the warrior readies a massive blade with one hand. Debris begins to swirl around the arena as the atmosphere grows increasingly volatile. Observing carefully, Ainz recognizes that his opponent is utilizing advanced mana manipulation for physical enhancement. A massive collision erupts as Talaj unleashes a strike with overwhelming destructive force. The impact sends the sorcerer skidding backward across the stone floor of the training grounds. Talaj's wooden practice weapon shatters completely under the strain of the heavy blow. Sophia and Leica gasp in shock at the sudden and violent escalation of the duel. The surrounding witnesses remain paralyzed by the terrifying power displayed by the seasoned warrior. An excited spectator shouts with glee, prematurely believing that the match has been decided. Standing amidst the settling dust, Talaj searches for any sign of his fallen opponent. The knight reflects on the lethal nature of his mana-reinforced technique designed to crush bone. A look of uncertainty crosses his face as he senses the battle is far from over. Ainz emerges unscathed from the wreckage while explaining his own use of defensive mana reinforcement. Talaj reels back in pure astonishment as he realizes his strongest attack was ineffective. A wave of relief washes over the companions as they see their friend standing tall. Looking quite bored, the sorcerer sighs and decides that the defensive games must end. The two warriors square off once more across the scarred landscape of the arena. Ainz finally prepares to take the initiative and launches a swift counteroffensive of his own. Ainz narrows his eyes as a blinding flash of light erupts between the two combatants. Talaj grinds his teeth in frustration while struggling to keep up with the sorcerer's sudden movements. Pressing the advantage, Ainz delivers a swift and powerful strike that catches the larger man off guard. The sorcerer maintains a cold and detached expression while explaining that he lacks the honor of a traditional knight. Sweat beads on the veteran's forehead as he realizes he is facing a truly monstrous opponent. A sharp glint in Ainz's eye signals a deceptive maneuver that leaves the warrior questioning his next move. The duel intensifies as Ainz launches a high-speed assault that forces Talaj into a desperate defensive posture. Confidently turning his back, the sorcerer murmurs that the conclusion of their match has finally arrived. He suddenly senses a change in the atmosphere and looks back with a hint of genuine surprise. Letting out a thunderous roar, Talaj pours every ounce of his remaining strength into one final effort. A violent impact rings out through the arena as the sorcerer's wooden practice sword shatters into several pieces. The official shouts in disbelief after witnessing a high-level technique that shouldn't be possible for a mage. Ainz scowls with irritation while complaining about how troublesome the situation has become. The broken fragments of the practice weapon spin through the air and clatter onto the stone floor. Sophia and Laika look on with wide eyes as they process the unexpected turn of events. A young spectator watches the conclusion of the fight with an intense and analytical gaze. The youth eventually breaks into a joyful cheer upon seeing the result of the high-stakes clash. Dust settles over the training grounds as the two men stand several paces apart in silence. Talaj catches his breath and admits that the sorcerer's final move was dangerously close to finishing him. Standing tall despite the exhaustion, the veteran points his weapon and officially declares that the duel has ended. Talaj stares in disbelief at the shattered remains of his practice sword. Ainz remains perfectly composed as his own wooden weapon disintegrates into magic dust. Nearby spectators watch the scene with wide eyes and open mouths. Darius breaks into a cold sweat while processing the intensity of the exchange. Laika remains frozen in place as she tries to comprehend the sorcerer's power. The veteran warrior demands an explanation for the sudden destruction of their weapons. Ainz coolly reveals that he funneled an unbearable amount of mana into the blades. The official intervenes immediately to prevent any further escalation of the duel. Raising his voice, the referee declares the high-stakes match to be a draw. As night falls over the capital, the duo walks through the lantern-lit streets. Sophia celebrates boisterously while claiming that Ainz proved his absolute superiority. The sorcerer remains quiet and pensive despite his companion's infectious enthusiasm. Noticing his silence, the young knight begins to lose her energetic composure. She bows deeply and offers a tearful apology for causing so much trouble. Ainz glances back and assures her that he isn't bothered by the day's events. Sophia wipes her eyes while her master admits he was simply analyzing the fight. He recalls the way Talaj expertly wove mana manipulation into his sword strikes. The knight looks on in shock as Ainz compares the veteran's skill to hers. A small smile plays on his lips while contemplating the nature of true mastery. He concludes that the highest level of swordsmanship may actually be a form of magic. Sophia stares in absolute awe as she realizes the true scale of her master's hidden power. Her expression softens into a radiant smile while she praises Ainz for his incredible nature. The pair finally reaches the grand estate as the night sky sparkles with countless stars. Bursting through the doors, Sophia cheerfully announces their return to the waiting household staff. Darius reacts with visible shock and relief upon seeing the two return safely from the duel. He quickly regains his composure and suggests they sit down for a celebratory dinner immediately. Sophia giggles at her father's flustered behavior, while Ainz watches the family dynamic with amusement. The sorcerer receives a warm welcome from the staff as he enters the dining hall. Greeting the household members with a kind smile, Ainz prepares to unwind after the long day. A lavish spread of gourmet dishes and fine wine is laid out across the table. Everyone gathers around the feast to enjoy a moment of peace amidst the chaotic events. Darius nods with satisfaction while listening to the report of the day's surprising developments. Sophia animatedly reenacts the intense battle between Ainz and the veteran warrior for the group, Leica gasps in disbelief after learning that Ainz fought a swordsman of the Empire's highest rank. Unaffected by the praise, the sorcerer simply enjoys the delicious meal with a content expression. Laughter echoes through the mansion as the group celebrates the successful conclusion of the examination. A freshly brewed cup of coffee is served to the men as they transition into serious conversation. Darius inquires about Ainz's plans while waiting for the official results of the Magic Academy entrance. Taking a quiet sip of his drink, the sorcerer reflects on his next move within the capital. The conversation shifts as Ainz discusses the intimidating magical formulas woven into the kingdom's royal throne. Darius begins to discuss official inquiries while Ainz listens with a composed expression. The sorcerer notes that there is no need to hurry since his plans remain flexible for now. He mentions that he would like to take a stroll through the city's western general district. Acknowledging the request, Darius warns him that the western area is a crowded commercial sector. Leica suddenly jumps at the chance to accompany him while the others discuss their own schedules. She loudly promises to handle any trouble that arises as Sophia reacts with visible anxiety. Deciding to call it a night, Ainz rises from his seat to head toward his guest quarters. Darius follows suit and bids the group a restful sleep before departing the room. The mansion falls into a peaceful silence as the household members retire for the evening. Moving through the shadows of the corridor, Leica maintains a rhythmic and steady pace. She eventually turns to Sophia to ask if she found everything she needed during their outing. Sophia expresses her deep appreciation with a humble bow, while the girls share a moment. Beaming with excitement, Leica encourages the young knight to look forward to the next day's plans. Sunlight soon bathes the grand facade of the mansion as a new day begins in the capital. Ainz remains fast asleep in his soft bed, completely unaware of the passing time. A maid knocks gently on the wooden door to inform him that breakfast is ready. Groggy sounds from within the room signal that the sorcerer is finally starting to wake up. Emerging into the hallway, he learns that the lord of the house has already left for business. Ainz looks slightly flustered when he is told that Sophia is currently alone in the dining room. The maid giggles to herself while suggesting that he might be quite startled by the current situation. Ainz walks down the hallway and cheerily greets Sophia at the door. He apologizes for the delay while approaching her with a friendly smile. The young knight stands there transformed in a graceful and flowing feminine dress. A look of pure astonishment washes over the sorcerer's face as he stares. He remains momentarily speechless while trying to process her elegant new appearance. Recovering his composure, Ainz praises her for looking like a refined young lady. He notes that she seems much more ready to enjoy their outing now. Sophia reacts with an intense blush and a look of stunned disbelief. Her face lights up with a radiant smile as she expresses her gratitude. The pair finally departs the mansion under the watchful eyes of the staff. They make their way through the sprawling and sunlit streets of the capital. Arriving at the busy western district, they find themselves surrounded by commercial life. Ainz scans the vibrant surroundings while commenting on the lively atmosphere around them. Sophia curiously asks why he specifically wanted to visit this part of town. He explains that a certain curiosity has been weighing on his mind lately. The sorcerer confirms his intentions while leading the way through the crowded street. He mentions noticing commoners with magical skills that rival those of noble children. Ainz wonders aloud about the existence of a place where such children learn magic. They continue their trek along the road as carriages rattle past them nearby. The realization hits him that he should have gathered more specific information beforehand. Sophia asks if they should return home, but Ainz hesitates while considering their next destination. He suggests exploring a final location they have yet to visit together. Their path leads them toward the southwestern district, where the architecture becomes noticeably more cramped. Clutter and discarded waste line the edges of the increasingly narrow stone paths. A mysterious figure lingers in the shadows of a weathered brick building nearby. Both travelers slow their pace as they enter a much more desolate neighborhood. Sophia notes the heavy shift in the atmosphere as they move deeper into the slums. A sudden and aggressive demand for valuables echoes through the quiet street ahead. Looking down the alley, they spot a group of men cornering someone in the distance. A terrified young girl huddles on the ground while her attackers loom over her. One man delivers a cruel kick while mocking the girl for her miserable existence. The rest of the thugs join in the harassment, pressing her to hand over her belongings. Desperate plea for help goes unanswered as the assault continues. An observer watches the scene from the darkness of a nearby doorway. A hand reaches out toward the girl as she continues to tremble in fear. Ainz and Sophia witness the cruelty with grim and silent intensity. Unable to watch any longer, Sophia stomps forward with an angry declaration. Standing tall, the knight commands the group to release the child at once. The lead thug looks back with a condescending sneer, questioning her right to interfere. Sophia labels their behavior as inexcusable, while the man scoffs at her sense of justice. The thugs sneer at their victim, claiming that the state has long since abandoned this neighborhood. A heavy boot strikes the trembling girl once more to emphasize their dominance over her. The girl's precious pendant is snatched away and tossed carelessly into the air. It lands with a sharp metallic clatter against the dirty cobblestone ground. A rough hand reaches down to snatch the stolen item from the filth. Grinning at their prize, the men decide it is time to depart for their leader. Sophia watches with gritted teeth, her resolve hardening as she prepares to strike. Her fingers tighten around the hilt of her sword in a clear threat to intervene. Suddenly, Ines calls out her name with a sharp and commanding tone to stop her. Startled, the knight turns back to find Ines standing perfectly still and watching. He looks on with a cold expression, labeling her sense of duty as a mere hindrance. The criminals walk away laughing while waving a mocking farewell to the pair. Sophia stands frozen in shock at the lack of intervention from her companion. She turns to Ines, questioning how he can simply let the criminals escape like this. Her voice trembles with indignation as she denounces the men's blatant cruelty. Ines calmly agrees that their behavior was indeed violent, but remains largely unmoved. Sophia asks point blank if he truly intends to leave the child suffering on the ground. Turning away, Ines dismisses the idea of helping as a complete waste of effort. The young knight stares at him in disbelief, unable to reconcile his absolute apathy. He challenges her perspective by asking why she singles out this one girl among thousands of others. Ines conjures a small vial from a shimmering spatial box to treat the girl's injuries. A clear liquid trickles from the bottle onto the child's bruised body to heal her. The girl sputters and coughs as the potent medicine begins to take effect immediately. Turning to leave, Ines signals Sophia to follow while the girl offers her thanks. Desperately calling out to them, the young child begs the pair to wait a moment. She pleads for the return of her mother's pendant, mentioning the thugs called it a relic. Glancing at Sophia, Ines uses the situation to highlight the girl's immediate reliance on others. His gaze remains frosty as he condemns those who seek salvation without any personal effort. Sophia remains silent, her expression weighed down by the harsh truth of his cruel logic. The girl stares back in stunned silence, her face pale from the stinging rebuke she receives. Ines bluntly questions why she expects them to risk violence when she won't fight herself. He further ponders the futility of returning the item if the outcome remains the same. Looking down at her, he predicts that any recovered treasure would simply be stolen again. Sophia interjects by reminding him of how he previously chose to save the boy Leet. Responding coldly, Ines notes that Leet desired power, whereas this girl has no resolve. The knight bows her head in sorrow, admitting that his verbal assault is far too merciless. Tears well up in the girl's eyes as she silently wishes for the strength to change. A heartbroken wail erupts from the child as she collapses into a fit of sobbing. Shifting the subject entirely, Ines casually asks about the meaning of the word relic. Sophia explains the term refers to sacred artifacts as Ines inquires about their specific nature. Sophia explains that common items like pendants or swords become relics when they generate mana. Ines wonders if his notes qualify as she confirms famous writings in Saint's Remains do. The mention of a saint's remains causes Ines to hesitate as he contemplates the term. Beaming with pride, Sophia mentions that their region only acknowledges two people as saints. She identifies the two individuals as Lord Evan and Lady Silica with a joyful smile. Ines abruptly stops walking and turns his back to her in a sudden, heavy silence. Sophia stares at him with a puzzled look, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. She gasps and holds her hands to her face as his reaction grows increasingly intense. Turning his gaze back toward her, Ines asks about the two people she just named. He bluntly asks the knight if Silica and Evan have both died. Looking down toward the floor, Sophia fidgets with her hands while confirming the tragic fact. Ines then demands to know how much time has passed since their departure from life. Sophia struggles to find the words, her expression pained as she prepares to answer him. The man waits in a grim silence for the information he is dreading to hear. She finally manages to give a quiet affirmation while looking away from his face. Tears well up in her eyes as she speaks about the loss of the two saints. Standing in the middle of a ruined room, she reveals that 2,000 years have passed. The young woman stands alone amidst the wreckage of the floor as the silence deepens. Ines's eyes widen in sheer shock as the gravity of the time skip hits him. He looks away with a troubled gaze, whispering the number 2000 as he realizes the truth. Ainz stands in heavy silence as the weight of the 2000 years settles in. A slight tremor shakes his frame as he processes the impossible timeline. He begins to let out a faint, dry chuckle that breaks the tension. Sophia watches him with a deeply concerned look. Unsure of his mental state, throwing his head back, Ainz erupts into full laughter at the sheer absurdity of it all. The view pans out to the architectural remnants of a world long forgotten. A close-up reveals intricate containers decorated with bows. A man nearby raises a megaphone to address the area. Clutching his forehead, Ainz contemplates the massive gap between his senses and reality. His eye narrows with a sudden, piercing focus on the unknown magic of this era. Sophia bows her head and apologizes for delaying the truth out of fear for his feelings. Ainz flashes a wide, maniacal grin and asks if she truly expected him to grieve. With arms spread wide, he strides forward into the ruins with newfound vigor and excitement. The young woman stares at his back, completely bewildered by his joyful reaction to such tragedy. A small figure of a child kneeling on the ground appears in the distance. The girl clutches her head and cries out for her mother's magic and memories. Watching her quietly, Ainz stares at his own hand, while the girl's sobbing continues. He approaches the child and asks for her name in the middle of the debris. The girl looks up with a startled and tearful expression, identifying herself as Kira. Ainz looks down at her and offers to share his knowledge of magic with her. Ainz looms over Sophia, stating he has a condition and wants her to look inward. Sophia reacts with genuine confusion at his cryptic and unexpected demand. Turning his attention back to Chiara, Ainz asks what she intends to do with magic. The young girl looks away while explaining her desire to retrieve her mother's keepsakes. Ainz probes deeper, questioning if merely reclaiming a memento is her only goal. Kira hesitates and admits that her true intentions might go beyond just that. He presses her to speak her mind clearly without any more hesitation. Softly, she confesses a dark wish to inflict greater suffering on those who hurt her. Ainz smiles and encourages her to find a more direct way to express herself. Silence follows as the girl remains lost in her grim contemplations. Ciara finally looks up with a haunting resolve and declares her intent to kill them. Acknowledging her dark ambition, Ainz confirms that this is the power she craves. Sophia attempts to interject with concern, but she is quickly cut off. With a chillingly focused gaze, Ainz warns Sophia never to interrupt his interrogation again. Stunned into silence, Sophia reels from the sheer weight of his warning. Returning to the girl, he asks what her plan is after the killing is done. Ciara vows to escape the slums and survive solely through her own abilities. Ainz points out that having power will only attract those who wish to exploit her. She looks down in uncertainty, wondering if there is any hope for salvation. He stares back with a piercing gaze, questioning if those who abandoned her deserve help. Ainz continues to loom over the trembling girl as he questions the fate of those who abandoned her. Ciara remains silent while staring into the dark shadows of the alleyway. A flicker of realization crosses her eyes as the weight of his words sinks in. Ainz directly asks what the slum residents did when her mother finally passed away. The memory strikes Ciara like a physical blow, leaving her momentarily breathless. She recalls the haunting image of greedy hands reaching out to exploit their tragedy. Reflecting on the moment she was left alone beside her mother's lifeless body, Ainz asks if she truly wants to remain a helpless victim rotting in the gutter. Snapping back to the present, she vehemently rejects the idea of staying weak. A sinister smile plays on his lips as he probes for her final decision. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echo through the corridor as a group of men approaches. The thugs mockingly suggest selling the child after they finish off the mysterious man. Sophia glares at the intruders, while wishing she had her blade to defend them. Ainz turns his back to the threats with an air of absolute indifference. He takes a deliberate step forward as his magical aura begins to fluctuate. A violent shockwave erupts from the point where his foot meets the stone floor. The ground shatters instantly, sending jagged debris flying toward the arrogant attackers. The men are caught in the blast, their bodies buckling under the sheer pressure. Ainz and the girls stand unscathed amidst the wreckage of the corridor. A distant observer remains hidden while witnessing the sorcerer's terrifying capabilities. Sophia stares in shock as the tension between the master and child grows. Ainz continues to speak with a cold and calculating gaze, pressing Kira to decide exactly what she intends to do next. The girl looks down while reflecting on those who abandoned her and her mother. A sudden surge of murderous intent fills her eyes as she responds. Ainz follows up with a final probe regarding her deepest desires for her mother. She admits her selfish wish for her mother to have looked only at her. Shara screams her desperate desire for all the people who ignored them to die. Ainz smiles as he declares that the dialogue phase has officially concluded. He extends his glowing, monstrous hand toward the girl to seal their pact. The sorcerer gently places his hand on Shara's head to transfer his power. Shock and realization wash over her as the magical resonance begins. An intense burst of energy crackles through the air between them. The surrounding corridor is enveloped in a blinding light as the contract manifests. Kara flinches when she feels the cold weight of his fingers on her forehead. He explains the restrictive conditions that come with accepting such a gift of strength. The girl clasps her hands together and bows her head in solemn acceptance. She takes a deep breath while focusing on the burgeoning power within her. A terrifying aura erupts as she finally releases her mental limiters. Dark and ominous smoke begins to rise from the center of her chest. A violent explosion of magical energy erupts with blinding intensity. Meanwhile, a dark, amorphous shadow surges from the ground toward the young girl. This release of power manifests as a colossal shock wave that shakes the foundation. Ainz and his companions watch as a pillar of white light pierces the sky. The sorcerer's silhouette looms large within the center of the radiant mist. Shortly after, a terrifying roar echoes from the shadowy figure as the transformation peaks. The massive entity then begins to collapse under the weight of the resonating mana. Black sparks rain down across the area as the intense light starts to fade. Sophia gazes at the aftermath with a mixture of dread and disbelief. Ainz breaks the silence by announcing their intent to confront the villains directly. The noblewoman quickly asks for clarification on where their enemies are currently hiding. Turning back, the master asks the girl if she can sense their presence. Shara confirms her connection to the targets with a newfound sense of resolve. Ainz offers a cold smile while promising to accompany her until the end. Suddenly, the scene shifts to a fierce exchange of blows between warring factions. Sharp magical projectiles whistle through the air during the chaotic skirmish. A thunderous impact reverberates through the corridor as the battle intensifies. A skilled swordsman strains against a powerful opponent in a deadly blade lock. The warrior pauses to catch his breath while glancing toward the approaching sorcerer. His weapon shatters into countless fragments as an unstoppable force overwhelms him. The swordsman stares in disbelief as the shards of his broken blade scatter onto the floor. While the young boy nearby bites his thumb in a fit of nervous anxiety, sweat pours down the warrior's face as he realizes his opponent possesses superior power. A void of darkness follows as the weight of the defeat sinks into his mind. He remains frozen in place while the mysterious long-haired figure discards the broken metal. The remaining piece of the hilt clatters against the hard ground with a final ring. Undeterred by the destruction, the elegant stranger looks on with a cold and vacant expression. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the imposing silhouette of a grand estate under the twilight sky. Inside the mansion, the swordsman and the boy walk across a wide, checkered hall. The youth wears a scowl of pure frustration as he glances back at his companion. He stops to berate the silent warrior for the failure that will reach his father's ears. Turning his back with a huff, the boy storms away through the long corridor. The swordsman lets out a heavy sigh as he is left alone with his thoughts. Retreating to a private room, he sits on the edge of a bed to reflect on the loss. He strokes his chin while contemplating the rumors of a find in the slums. His eyes narrow as he focuses on the memory of the one who broke his spirit. Clutching his hand, he wonders if obtaining a certain high-value artifact could change his fate. The warrior eventually collapses onto the mattress to vent his lingering irritation. Staring up at the intricate wooden beams of the ceiling, he considers his next move. He visualizes the calm opponent standing ready with a blade that matches their chilling resolve. The young boy shouts in a frantic rage while pointing an accusing finger at the warrior. He storms across the room in a huff as the swordsman remains seated at a small table. The silent warrior glances sideways with a focused and calculating gaze after the child begins to calm. A sudden close-up reveals the boy's eye widening in shock as he considers a new possibility. Turning back to face his comrade, the boy gestures wildly while discussing the prospect of a relic. His previous anger melts into a wide and mischievous grin as he envisions a way to succeed. Peeking through the crack of a closing door, the youth offers a final smug look before departing. The heavy door shuts with a definitive click, leaving the warrior alone in the quiet room. Letting out a long breath, the man prepares himself for the covert task he must now undertake. His boots click rhythmically against the stone floor as he begins to march out of the estate. Crossing the wide bridge under the darkening sky, the swordsman leaves the grand mansion far behind him. He navigates through the quiet streets of the town as lights begin to flicker in the windows. Stopping for a moment, he surveys the timbered buildings of the district to find a specific destination. The warrior maintains a steady pace while passing by a lively tavern filled with local patrons. A dark silhouette of the lone wanderer moves across a sloping path on the edge of town. Approaching a secluded building tucked away from the road, he checks for any unwanted observers. He pushes open the heavy door and steps inside with a weary but determined expression. Two men inside the hidden room immediately light up with excitement and shout out a greeting. Lounging in a large chair, the swordsman is surrounded by subordinates who await his report. He sits back and begins to explain the situation while planning their next move for the artifact. The swordsman listens intently as his companion brings up the necessity of acquiring a certain relic. A subordinate with slick back hair gestures enthusiastically while confirming he intends to retrieve it tomorrow. The man with the facial bandage looks on skeptically while idly fiddling with a small object. With a cunning glint in his eye, the leader offers a knowing smirk in response to the plan. Loud shouts of agreement regarding a night of drinking echo through the room. Commotion and the sound of breaking glass erupt from inside the house as the night deepens. The rowdy celebrations continue well into the evening beneath the silhouette of the jagged mountains. Sharp gazes shift as the weight of their decisions lingers in the quiet of the late hours. Morning arrives with the swordsman slumped in his chair, clutching his head amidst scattered wine bottles. He peers up through a haze of exhaustion, his eyes reflecting the toll of the previous night's revelry. Looking toward the table, he sees his men gathered around a shimmering pendant held aloft. The small jewel dangles from a thin cord, catching what little light filters into the room. The subordinates offer a cheerful greeting to their hungover leader while continuing their breakfast. Proudly presenting the item, the slick-haired man identifies it as the sought-after holy relic. The swordsman inspects the pendant with a doubtful expression, noting its deceptively cheap and simple appearance. His subordinate quickly clarifies that this artifact possesses the unique ability to generate infinite magical energy. Realizing the strategic importance of such a find, the warrior contemplates its worth in a magical kingdom. A closer look at the central stone reveals a strange, swirling mist trapped within the gem. Tossing the item back, the leader instructs his men to store it safely before he retreats for more rest. The subordinate maintains a pleasant smile while revealing they are already in the process of a kidnapping. The bandit leader remains seated while his men discuss selling their captives for a hefty profit. As they casually complain about their booze supply being cut off as a temporary punishment, their conversation is abruptly interrupted by the sound of the front door being kicked open, revealing the silhouetted figures of Ines, Sophia, and the young girl standing in the entrance. The slick-haired subordinate recoils in shock, unable to believe they have been discovered so quickly. Meanwhile, the swordsman leader stares in disbelief at the unexpected intruders appearing at his doorstep. Springing into action, the warriors in the room jump to their feet as tensions immediately peak. Sophia maintains a composed demeanor while staring down the men who stole from the village. Stepping into the light, Ines introduces himself with a cold gaze that demands absolute respect. The bandit leader responds by drawing his heavy claymore, eager for a rematch against his rival. Looking thoroughly unimpressed, the ancient sorcerer sighs at the man's predictable and repetitive behavior. Suddenly, the little girl cries out in joy after spotting her mother's pendant across the room. Reacting quickly, the subordinate pulls the relic back and prepares to defend his stolen prize. He keeps a firm grip on the shimmering cord as he prepares for a violent struggle. Sophia narrows her eyes upon confirming that the item in the man's hand is the relic. After receiving a quiet command from her master, the young mage prepares to reclaim the treasure. The bandit sneers at her while unsheathing his sword, believing a child poses no real threat. He lunges forward with murderous intent, aiming his blade directly at the group by the door. Focusing her internal mana, Sophia initiates a powerful spell that causes the air to vibrate intensely. Massive pillars of black flame erupt from her hands to consume the room and end the battle. The dark magic immediately latches onto the first attacker, consuming him in a shroud of shadow. The explosion of black mana spreads across the hideout floor to engulf multiple enemies at once. One bandit lets out a final desperate scream as the magical energy completely overwhelms his body. His companions can only watch in absolute terror as their strongest fighters are neutralized instantly. The leader's expression shifts to one of sheer disbelief at the overwhelming display of magical force. Debris and dust fill the air as the central meeting area is utterly devastated by Sophia. The sheer power of the blast sends shock waves through the structure of the wooden building. Several village relics are knocked loose from the bandits' possession and scatter into the air. Standing amidst the settling dust, the trio faces down the remaining shell-shocked bandits. The surviving criminals remain frozen in place, too terrified to even consider another attack. Realizing the tide has turned, the leader breaks into a cold sweat while reconsidering his chances. Ainz turns to Sophia with a calm smile to deliver his final instructions for the confrontation. He emphasizes the importance of securing the pendant before the situation escalates any further. Sophia listens carefully to her master's advice, absorbing the wisdom of his long experience. Glancing toward his rival, the ancient sorcerer speaks with a tone of utter boredom and dismissal. He proposes moving their duel outside to ensure the young girl remains safe from harm. A confident smirk plays on Ainz's lips as he goads the swordsman into following him. The bandit leader stands his ground, surrounded by his remaining men while weighing his pride. Ainz remains perfectly composed, waiting for the inevitable choice from his frustrated opponent. Finally, the swordsman gives in to his rage and accepts the invitation with a wicked smile. Sophia watches with a concerned expression as the tension in the room shifts. Her features tighten with a grim resolve while she prepares for the coming fight. Ainz and his rival agree to move their duel away from the hideout. The remaining bandits quickly move to surround Sophia and Sierra on all sides. Sophia grips a discarded sword firmly, stepping forward to shield the young girl. Two attackers approach with their weapons drawn, confident in their numerical advantage. A bandit scoffs at the idea of magic being able to melt steel. He leaps into the air to deliver a crushing blow against his target. Sarah remains unmoved as the enemy's blade begins to warp and smoke. The man stares in shock at the sight of his sword turning into dust. Dark mana erupts from the point of contact, shattering the remnants of the weapon. Shira's eyes narrow as she releases a more concentrated surge of her power. The magical energy latches onto the attacker's arm and begins to consume it. Desperation fills the bandit's face as he pleads for mercy from the child. Her cold gaze never wavers while the shadows continue their relentless assault. The dark shroud moves up to the man's face, muffling his final screams. A massive explosion of black energy obliterates the bandit in front of everyone. Sophia recoils in horror at the brutal efficiency of her companion's magic. The surviving criminals shrink away, paralyzed by the sight of their comrades' end. Gera declares her absolute resolve to protect her allies without showing any hesitation. Kara remains enveloped in dark mana while asserting her dominance over the remaining bandits. Out in the open, Ainz and his rival square up for their long-awaited confrontation. Ainz speaks with a relaxed smile, clearly unimpressed by the warrior before him. The rival shouts in anger, determined to break through Ainz's calm facade. Tension radiates from the warrior as he focuses all his energy on the upcoming move. Ainz holds out his hand and declares he will use every tool at his disposal. He begins an incantation that starts to ripple through the surrounding air. The spell takes effect instantly, locking the rival in a state of complete stasis. His pupils dilate as he finds himself unable to move a single muscle. Ainz explains that his magic is specifically designed to halt a target's consciousness. A magical box opens in the air, allowing him to retrieve a hidden sword. He stares coldly at the weapon while the world around him remains still. Ainz begins a slow walk toward his frozen opponent, the sound of his footsteps echoing. The warrior stays trapped in time, his body caught mid-action by the spell. Moving with leisure, Ainz passes right by the man who cannot even blink. The rival suddenly gasps as time resumes, and he realizes Ainz is behind him. Ainz exhales a weary sigh, disappointed by the lack of resistance he encountered. He catches a desperate swing from his opponent with a casual parry. Wide-eyed and drenched in sweat, the rival reels from the sudden shift in power. The defeated warrior grinds his teeth and mutters a final curse at his superior enemy. Ainz's eyes widen slightly as he detects a sudden change in his opponent's aura. The warrior exerts all his strength to halt Ainz's blade with a desperate parry. A massive shockwave erupts from their clash, sending dust and debris into the air. Ainz retreats with a light hop, while the exhausted warrior struggles to breathe. A condescending smile plays on Ainz's lips as he praises the man's mental fortitude. The rival focuses his remaining strength, declaring he will use a forbidden divine power. He lunges forward with a strike so powerful it leaves black ink-like trails behind. Ainz watches the approaching warrior with a look of utter boredom and indifference. He taps his foot against the ground, signaling the activation of another spell. Colossal structures of dark energy rise from the earth to crush the attacker. The warrior's eyes burn with intensity as he refuses to back down. He strikes out at the encroaching magic while cursing the arrogance of mages. Ainz leans back and yawns, showing no concern for the battle unfolding before him. A series of violent explosions bury the warrior under a mountain of pressure. The warrior grunts in pain as a sudden force grazes his side. A powerful energy slash carves a deep line across the ground. Pieces of the environment fly apart as the warrior struggles to stay on his feet. He unleashes a wild horizontal slash while screaming in sheer rage. Ainz casually shifts his weight to avoid the blade without moving an inch more than necessary. With a casual flick of his finger, Ainz prepares to deliver the finishing blow. Ainz stands against a dark sky filled with falling magical shards while his opponent prepares for a desperate clash. The warrior grits his teeth in shock and frustration as he stares at the overwhelming power before him. A massive explosion of power occurs as the warrior unleashes a barrage of strikes to counter the pressure. He screams out in agony while his eyes widen at the sight of Ainz's effortless counterattack. Sharp blades of energy slice through the air, drawing blood from the warrior's arms and legs. Ainz pulls a small rectangular object from his pocket with a calm and detached expression. He holds the object steadily while a small blade begins to manifest through its transparent surface. The warrior tightly grips his sword as magical effects dance around the blade's hilt. Sweat pours down his face as he ponders the impossible gap between their abilities. Heavy energy lines fill the background while the warrior vents his rage at the mage's tricks. The two combatants clash head-on, their blades sparking as they struggle for dominance in a burst of light. Reeling back from the impact, the warrior growls while trying to maintain his balance. Ainz remains perfectly still with his sword extended as dust settles around the struggling warrior. Clutching his injured arm, the warrior curses under his breath while refusing to admit defeat. Ainz looks up with a blank stare, casually explaining that the warrior's divine power is just simple mana. A sinister smile spreads across Ainz's face as he announces a high-speed chant technique. Ainz blurs into motion, appearing in multiple places at once to overwhelm his opponent's defenses. The warrior's jaw drops in disbelief as he recognizes a legendary triple strike technique being used against him. He desperately attempts to block the lightning-fast sequence of strikes raining down on his position. Blood spatters across the scene as the warrior's armor is shredded by the precise and relentless swordplay. Terrage recoils in pain as his body bears the weight of the previous exchange. Ainz watches the gasping warrior from a distance, standing tall with effortless grace. The mage begins to step forward slowly, his boots clicking softly against the earth. Ainz plants his weapon into the soil while maintaining a dominant and calm posture. Terrage looks upward through his disheveled hair, questioning the nature of his opponent's power. He erupts in a fit of pure rage, demanding to know where such techniques were learned. Ainz merely smiles back with a look of serene confidence as he listens to the outburst. The warrior's expression softens into bitter defeat as he acknowledges the insurmountable skill gap. Terrage clenches his trembling fist around the hilt of his sword, refusing to let go. Falling to one knee, the exhausted fighter admits his inability to match the mage's prowess. Ainz leans in slightly, asking for the name of the man who fought so desperately. The warrior identifies himself as Terrage while staring at the ground in shame. Ainz introduces himself formally as the mage Ainz, clarifying his identity to his fallen foe. He closes his eyes and explains that he has finally found something of interest here. Terrage looks on with a mix of confusion and suspicion as the atmosphere begins to shift. A cold and calculating light glimmers in Ainz's eyes as he prepares his next move. The mage's pupil transforms into a complex mechanical pattern, revealing a hidden ocular ability. Terrage's face pales in absolute horror as he witnesses the activation of the mystic eyes. Ainz looms over his opponent with terrifying speed, catching the warrior off guard once more. He commands Terrage to pick up his sword as the true lesson finally begins. Terrage gasps in surprise as he grips his blade, sensing a sudden shift in the air. Ainz chants a high-level incantation with his eyes shut, calling forth a secret technique. Suddenly, two identical copies of the mage manifest to flank the confused warrior. One clone assumes a graceful stance while brandishing a sword with lethal intent. Terrage smirks through his sweat, realizing he is facing a divine level of swordsmanship. The multiple iterations of Ainz explain the necessity of reaching such heights through dialogue. The clones leap into the sky simultaneously, descending like a storm of steel. A powerful downward strike from one copy forces Terrage to block with everything he has. Sparks erupt violently as the blades grind against each other in a frantic struggle. Despite the pressure, Terrage bellows with joy, relishing the challenge of the overwhelming assault. Meanwhile, the long-haired woman watches the destruction unfold with a look of pure dread. She stands beside a companion as they survey the scorched remains of the landscape. Thick plumes of steam rise from the blackened mounds littering the battlefield. A small, determined foot steps forward, crushing the burnt debris beneath its weight. The remaining fighters brace themselves as the shadows and embers swirl around them. A mysterious figure in a white dress slowly approaches the weary group of warriors. She reveals a chilling expression, her eyes dark and vacant as she addresses them. The men recoil in terror, their faces pale as they hear her unsettling words. A hand reaches out to display a glowing pendant suspended from a thin cord. Ainz warns the woman that she must never hand over the jewel if she wishes to live. Two warriors stand their ground, brandishing swords against the mysterious woman holding a radiating dark artifact. One of the men trembles uncontrollably, his face contorted in a mask of absolute terror and desperation. The woman gazes back with an unsettlingly calm expression, her eyes betraying no emotion or hesitation. Suddenly, black tendrils of power erupt from the earth to skewer the man through his chest. Blood sprays across the air as the violent force of the impact tears through his body. His eyes bulge in shock, realizing too late that his life is slipping away in an instant. Jagged shards continue to pierce his flesh, pinning him against the weight of the dark magic. The force of the assault sends him flying backward into a cloud of debris and bone-like structures. Several more projectiles strike his back, ensuring that he will not rise again from this battlefield. A final strike connects with his neck, ending his struggle as blood fountains from the wound. He collapses onto the cold ground, leaving his remaining companion to face the woman alone. The surviving warrior points his trembling blade at the girl, his breath hitching in his throat. Realizing the futility of resistance, he lets his weapon fall to the floor with a hollow clang. He sinks to his knees in total submission, the weight of his fear crushing his resolve. With a shaking hand, he presents the glowing pendant as an offering to the powerful figure. He remains bowed in a desperate plea for mercy while she stands over him in silence. Her dark eyes narrow slightly as she observes the broken man at her feet. The vastness of the empty battlefield surrounds them, emphasizing the one-sided nature of their encounter. The warrior continues to hold the jewel aloft, waiting for a judgment that seems slow to come. She stares at him with a chilling, vacant look, her silence heavier than any verbal threat. A pale hand reaches down to take the glowing pendant from the kneeling warrior's offer. Her mentor shouts out a desperate warning to stop her from touching the artifact. The swordswoman glares with intense focus, sweating as she commands her to stay away. Glancing back with a calm and distant look, the girl questions her friend's motives. The warrior reacts with visible shock and concern as the air grows heavy with tension. Swirling shadows dance around the young girl while she continues her cold inquiry. A tense silence follows as the older woman's eye narrows in a mixture of fear and resolve. Her hands tighten around the hilt of her blade, feeling the weight of the moment. They stand opposed on the dark battlefield, separated by more than just physical distance. With a pained expression, the swordswoman confesses her deep fear for the girl's life. The girl responds with a subtle, enigmatic smile, while doubting the possibility of her demise. Dark energy crackles nearby as she confidently asserts her power to destroy any coming threat. Panicking at the girl's defiance, the mentor reaches out in a final, frantic plea. Turning her head slightly, the girl rejects the warning with a declaration of her immortality. Her fingers finally brush against the surface of the pendant, igniting a dark spark. She lifts the source of power high, its radiance beginning to overflow from her grasp. A massive eruption of light and force consumes the area, shaking the very earth. As the light fades, the girl looks toward the heavens with a serene and haunting expression. She whispers a soft word to her mother, her face softening for a fleeting second. A single tear rolls down her cheek even as a peaceful smile remains on her lips. A peaceful expression settles over the girl's face as she drifts away from the chaos. Meanwhile, the mentor's face contorts in a scream of pure and unfiltered agony. Standing alone, the girl watches as a massive crack splits the very fabric of reality. Suddenly, a colossal and ethereal hand descends from the void, while the swordswoman reaches out. While the scene unfolds, ancient words echo through the silent and dark streets below. Casting a final, sorrowful glance, the girl accepts her fate with a quiet smile. Now her silhouette stands small and fragile against the blinding glow of the moon. As the enormous hand reaches for her, the kneeling warrior remains motionless on the ground. Soon, a subtle ripple passes through the girl's hair as the energy begins to fade. Across from her, the mentor stares in disbelief, her eyes welling with a terrible realization. Gradually turning away from the kneeling warrior, the girl's strength finally begins to desert her. Without warning, she collapses forward into the mentor's arms, her body suddenly growing heavy. Consequently, her arm hangs limp and motionless while her friend holds her tightly. Her eyes remain shut as a deep and unnatural sleep overtakes her entire being. Looking down, the mentor's face is etched with sweat and despair as she holds her. While cradling the girl in the middle of the desolate road, she whispers a plea. Just then, a mysterious figure in a long coat emerges from the shadows of an alley. Pausing to observe the tragic scene, his mismatched eyes glow with a cold interest. A tense atmosphere settles as the stranger stands over the mentor and the unconscious girl. Finally, he reaches down to retrieve the fallen pendant from the cold ground. The mysterious man looks down solemnly, his voice carrying a heavy weight as he speaks of the inevitable. Kneeling before the grieving pair, he explains the absolute law that every sorcerer must uphold. He holds the retrieved pendant tightly, hovering it just above the girl's cold and lifeless fingers. With a lowered head, he reveals that Kira has crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. Standing alone in the dark rain, he reflects on the many others who failed to master the black flame. The mentor's face pales with a sudden realization as she listens to his cryptic and chilling words. As the rain continues to fall, he details the cruel fate that awaits those who break their sacred vow. His eye narrows with a sense of grim certainty, admitting that this tragic end was always expected. Suddenly, a cluster of brilliant light orbs begins to manifest and pulse in the air behind them. The mentor gazes upward in total bewilderment as the mysterious energy starts to swirl around the girl. Looking toward the sky, the man notes that those who violate their constraints are denied even a peaceful death. The girl's physical form begins to dissolve into thousands of tiny, glowing shards that float away. Her features start to blur and fade as the supernatural process takes full effect. A faint, knowing smile touches the man's lips while he speaks of reclaiming a lost existence. He grandly gestures toward the rising lights as the mentor can only watch her friend vanish. The brilliant sparks continue their ascent, scattering into the infinite darkness of the night sky. Silence returns to the road as the man looms over the mentor, who remains frozen in shock. Letting out a long and weary sigh, he seems to release the tension of the long night. He turns a calm gaze toward the woman on the ground and suggests it is time to depart. Standing with a composed expression, he waits for her to gather herself as the light finally fades. The companion suggests ending their search for the day, hoping to resume their journey tomorrow morning. Ainz listens with a serene look on his face, his mind seemingly miles away from their current surroundings. Strolling together along the quiet outskirts of the city, they discuss the aftermath of the massive slum fire. She notices the object in his hand and curiously asks about the history behind the small pendant. He explains that the trinket was a gift given to him by Kira before her tragic departure. Surprised by his recollection, she playfully remarks on how rare it is for him to remember names. Sensing a shift in his mood, she asks if the day's events have finally exhausted his spirit. He confirms his fatigue while she tries to lift his spirits with the promise of a hearty meal. Suddenly stopping in his tracks, a look of realization flashes across his face as he remembers something. He cryptically mentions forgetting a significant piece of luggage, leaving his companion completely baffled by his words. Meanwhile, back at the ruins, the fallen knight remains sprawled across the broken stone and debris. Far away, the sun rises over a towering fortress that looms ominously over the surrounding landscape. Inside the palace, a sharp knife slices through a perfectly seared piece of meat during breakfast. The lady of the manor complains about the early morning commotion while taking a bite. Seated at a massive dining table, she listens to her maid describe the mysterious blaze in the slums. The servant reports that eyewitnesses saw a terrifying black flame consuming everything in its path. Pausing for a moment, the woman seems struck by the peculiar nature of the magical fire. She swirls her wine while pondering the threat of a powerful sorcerer lurking within the capital. Messengers dash through the arched hallways of the castle to deliver urgent news to the high command. Taking a slow sip of her drink, she contemplates the dark implications of the legendary Black Flame's return. A steady hand holds a wine glass as she dismissively comments on the current situation, catching her maid completely off guard with a remark about their lack of involvement. She waits while the servant carefully pours more dark liquid into her elegant glass, swirling the drink while confidently asserting that a sorcerer must be the one responsible for the disaster. She focuses her gaze while questioning if there has been any word from the Marquis. The maid explains that the Marquis plans to present a holy relic later that afternoon, absorbing the news with a silent, calculating expression as she considers the timing of the visit. Suddenly, the servant spins around in shock at an unexpected intrusion into the private room. An elderly man stands at the entrance and offers a calm apology for disturbing their breakfast. Recognizing the high-ranking visitor as the emperor, the maid gasps in total disbelief and fear. She bows frantically while the monarch graciously dismisses her concern with a wave of his hand. Lieselotte stays seated and points out the bright red face of the monarch's young companion. She continues to tease the embarrassed youth about his sudden fascination with her revealing appearance. The emperor snaps back at her with a sharp insult about her age to end the taunting. Shifting the conversation to serious matters, he asks for her expert opinion on the mysterious black flames. She confirms that such powerful sorcery should have been extinct in this modern era, leaving both visitors frozen in place as they process the terrifying implications of her words. She details the heavy price and restrictions placed upon those who dare to use black flames. She finally invites them to take a seat while dismissing her servant from the chamber. The maid quietly withdraws and shuts the door to leave the three powerful figures alone. The door clicks shut, leaving the three powerful figures to speak in absolute privacy, sitting across from one another as Lieselotte begins to elaborate on the reappearance of black flames. She clarifies that neither she nor Ainz should naturally possess such forbidden magic in this age, theorizing that a new sorcerer has emerged who was likely guided by Ainz himself. She explains how the constraints of a holy relic would be affected by such volatile magic, concluding that everything has already been set in motion by the ancient sorcerer's intervention. The emperor listens intently while processing the revelation that the disaster was likely deliberate. Lieselotte suggests summoning Ainz directly, but warns that his presence might overwhelm them. The monarch decides to set that aside to discuss a brewing conflict between noble houses. She grins while swirling her wine, well aware of the long-standing rivalry between the families. He reveals that Ainz took a servant from House Sobi as his own without permission. Curious about the sorcerer's motivation, she asks how he justified such a bold seizure. The young companion reports that Sophia claimed Ainz is currently interrogating the man. The emperor sighs in frustration at the lack of a proper explanation for the theft. Lieselotte's tone turns icy as she strictly warns them never to interfere with that process. Her sudden change in demeanor leaves both the emperor and the youth staring in stunned silence. She maintains a firm grip on her glass while emphasizing the gravity of the situation, stating clearly that interrupting the interrogation could cause the entire country to perish overnight. The two guests remain frozen as the true scale of the potential catastrophe sinks in. The emperor finally accepts the warning while worrying about how to pacify the furious noble family. Lieselotte turns toward her desk to pen a formal decree that might resolve the diplomatic tension. Her hand moves swiftly across the parchment as she scratches out a message with a quill. She hands over the signed document while instructing the emperor to fill in the rest as needed. The monarch stares at the paper in disbelief upon seeing her unexpected cooperation in this matter. She looks away with a slight scowl, clearly annoyed by the necessity of such trivial paperwork. The official suddenly rushes out of the room with a joyful expression, clutching the precious signature. The young attendant remains behind and apologizes for the emperor's sudden and undignified departure. Lieselotte remains silent for a moment before calling out to the youth by his name, Harald. She gazes out the window while warning him to keep a very close eye on Kirishia. Harald responds with a sharp look of concern, realizing the weight of her cryptic advice. He turns toward the exit and begins his departure to carry out his new assignment. The heavy door clicks shut, leaving the sorceress alone in the silence of the chambers. A few moments later, a maid enters the room to attend to her mistress's needs. Lieselotte takes a seat and asks if the servant understands the true nature of holy relics. The maid begins to pour tea while reciting the common knowledge about these legendary items. She explains that relics are known for providing their owners with an inexhaustible supply of mana. Smiling brightly, the servant suggests that the power comes from the noble wills of former heroes. Lisa Lotta's expression darkens as she immediately rejects that optimistic interpretation of the magical objects. She explains that those who live fulfilling lives leave nothing behind in this world. A grim vision of a guillotine appears as she describes how relics are born from lingering grudges. She describes these holy items as masses of undying madness that drip with lingering resentment. The maid stands frozen in terror, her hand trembling as she absorbs the chilling explanation. Lieslot maintains a calm gaze while acknowledging the nameless sorcerer who felt this dark truth. Silence fills the ornate dining hall as the two women remain still beneath the towering windows. Outside, the sun shines brightly over the sprawling stone battlements of the imperial castle. High above the mountains, the midday sun pierces through a layer of thin white clouds. Light dances across the distant horizon, casting long shadows over the peaceful kingdom below. Returning to the quiet chamber, the sorceress sits motionless at the long wooden table. Her thoughts drift specifically toward the legendary original manuscript penned by the sorcerer Ainz. She reflects on the immense mana contained within that book, which would drive any normal human insane. Rising from her seat, she turns her back to the room and faces the window. Her heavy outer garment begins to slide slowly down her shoulders as she prepares for rest. The fabric pools around her bare feet on the carpeted floor of the private quarters. Standing in the dim light, she wonders what madness her master witnessed during his long journey. She looks off into the distance, pondering the ultimate fate that awaits those who seek power. A small, knowing smile plays on her lips as she reflects on the secrets of the past. Turning toward the shadows, she walks gracefully across the room toward the large canopy bed. She eases herself onto the soft mattress, the cool sheets greeting her tired frame. Pulling the covers up to her chin, the sorceress finally allows her eyes to drift shut. Meanwhile, the quiet of the night settles over the grand facade of the city's central library. Sophia and Kansas gather around a bed where the bandaged Zoan lies unconscious. The wounded man remains still on the white sheets while his companions observe his condition. Sophia explains the gravity of the situation as Kansas listens with a worried expression. Turning the conversation toward the future, Sophia flashes a bright and cheerful smile. She proposes making the injured man her personal attendant with an innocent look. The maid stands nearby, her face contorting in utter disbelief at the sudden suggestion. Kansas reacts with extreme shock, his eyes bulging as he processes the outrageous request. Despite his protests, Sophia maintains her sunny disposition while finalizing the new arrangement. Her expression softens as she speaks of the passing of time and forgotten legacies. A small, mysterious smile remains on her face while she looks away in thought. Stunned by the firm decision, Kansas stands frozen with sweat dripping down his forehead. Lieslot looks down in silence, feeling the weight of the social shift occurring before her. Kansas acknowledges the mysterious circumstances, but accepts the outcome with a wary gaze. Sophia speaks again with a colder edge, her face obscured by shadows as she sets boundaries. She warns Kansas against interfering in the domain of a true sorcerer. The threat of death lingers in the air as Kansas absorbs the terrifying ultimatum. He quickly agrees to treat the guest with the respect demanded by his master. The tension breaks as Sophia chats happily about her new junior attendant. Kansas reflects on the cold nature of Ainz, who views everyone as disposable tools. He watches from the shadows as the women continue their lively chatter by the window. Kansas trembles with suppressed rage while standing in his formal suit. Sophia continues her playful mockery while Lieslot observes with a flat expression. The two women ignore Kansas's frustration as they joke about his new role. Kansas snaps back with a sharp retort, his face contorted in annoyance. Laughter echoes through the grand mansion as the group continues their spirited debate. The sun begins to set over the sprawling estate, casting long shadows across the bridge. Elsewhere, young Darius stands trembling with anxiety as he prepares for a difficult meeting. He approaches his father's study with a heavy heart and visible hesitation. The boy stands before the large desk where his father sits, reviewing important documents. Darius listens with wide, fearful eyes as the conversation turns toward family politics. His father remains composed while explaining the gravity of a recent royal decree. A formal document is held up, detailing the king's unexpected intervention in their affairs. The pressure of the situation weighs heavily on Darius, who remains frozen in place. Signatures on the parchment confirm that high-ranking nobles have turned against their house. The boy struggles to comprehend the tactical maneuvering happening behind the scenes. Sweating profusely, Darius apologizes for bringing dishonor to the family name. His father sighs deeply, closing his eyes to hide his growing disappointment. He explains that their ancient family now faces a threat that could destroy everything. The man stands and pulls back the curtains, gazing out at the kingdom he serves. He grips the fabric tightly as he realizes the true power of his new enemies. In the dimly lit study, Darius's father questions what exactly Kansas managed to acquire. Mentioning Talridge as the true center of the unfolding conflict, the man dismisses the holy relics as a convenient excuse meant for the king's ears. Darius hesitantly brings up Rika Brandy and her mysterious attendant. Hearing the name Ainz, his father's expression shifts into something more calculating. A sudden realization strikes the young boy, his eye widening with visible dread. The older man explains that Ainz poses a threat significant enough to move Lady Lieselot. He then ignites a document, watching as the flames consume the evidence of their failure. Darius stares ahead in terror, finally grasping the true value of the land Ainz sought. Gesturing broadly, his father describes how the delicate balance between their rival houses has been shattered. The pressure becomes unbearable for the boy, who breaks into a cold sweat while stammering. His father's sharp, piercing gaze remains fixed on him with unwavering intensity. Turning his back to the room, the man walks toward the window to contemplate their next move. Uncorking a bottle, the father asks if Darius knew about the siblings he once had. The boy admits he never heard such a thing from his mother during his upbringing. With a chillingly calm expression, his father confirms their existence while staring into the void. He pours himself a drink, explaining the dark history of the Sobey house and its short-lived heirs. The young noble remains paralyzed by the weight of these grim family secrets. Trembling with fear, Darius whispers about a potential curse haunting their bloodline. His father responds with a dry, cynical laugh that echoes through the silent room. Darius's father throws his head back in a manic laugh. Reveling in the dark irony of their situation, his face hardens into a chillingly intense stare that fixes on his terrified young son. Gesturing toward the framed portraits of their ancestors, he highlights the short-lived nature of their bloodline. The boy looks down in stunned silence, his features shadowed by a growing sense of existential dread. His legs shake uncontrollably as the physical manifestation of his overwhelming fear takes hold of him. Collapsing onto the floor in utter despair, Darius watches his father turn back toward the family history. The older man drinks deeply from his glass, seemingly unbothered by the psychological trauma he is inflicting. He casts a sideways glance accompanied by a cold smirk, finding grim amusement in their family's plight. Two portraits on the wall reveal haunting figures, one of which possesses a singular, piercing white eye. An extreme close-up of a wide, panicked eye captures the moment of absolute psychological breakdown. Darkness seems to coalesce around the boy as multiple eyes stare back from the void of his mind. A silent scream of pure terror escapes Darius as the weight of the curse feels physically crushing. Standing over his fallen son, the father continues to speak with a cold and detached authority. A monstrous entity with a dozen unblinking eyes looms over the boy, symbolizing the ancestral weight. The terrifying manifestation draws closer, its many pupils dilated as it stalks the trembling young noble. The scene abruptly shifts to a grand, sunlit estate where a peaceful day is well underway. Inside a bright dining room, a mustachioed man converses warmly while Rika enjoys her meal. She stuffs a large piece of bread into her mouth with a happy, carefree expression. Nearby, a young noble drinks from a bottle while his companions watch his lack of manners. The mustachioed host folds his hands and asks Ainz about the upcoming Magic Academy entrance results. Ainz listens intently to the conversation about the academy while reflecting on the pointlessness of exams. Sophia mentions that the academy's cafeteria is rumored to serve incredibly delicious food. Hearing about the cafeteria, Ainz reacts with a comical expression of shock and hunger. The mustachioed host explains that the high standards of noble students force the culinary quality upward. Ainz expresses a sudden and intense fascination with the idea of tasting these legendary meals. Nearby, a young woman listens with a skeptical look as the topic turns toward social dynamics. Sophia smiles warmly, noting how much she looks forward to Ainz attending as her attendant. She casts a sly, knowing smirk toward the host who seems relieved by the arrangement. The scene transitions to the grand mansion exterior at night, while boisterous laughter rings out. Light spills from the numerous windows of the massive estate into the quiet evening air. Elsewhere, a soldier knocks and enters a private office to deliver an urgent message. Commander Gauss hunches over his desk, struggling through a mountain of administrative paperwork. The messenger announces that a formal report has finally arrived from Sophia. Grumbling about her lateness, Gauss dismisses the soldier and prepares to read the contents. He begins to break the wax seal on the envelope with a focused expression. The commander quickly pulls the letter out, eager to see what his subordinate discovered. Pausing to stretch his overworked muscles, he complains about the sheer volume of his duties. His eyes narrow as he reads that Ines might have accidentally learned too much. A sense of unease settles over the office as the implications of the report sink in. He stares at the document detailing the alliance between Ines and the Marquis with profound shock. Gauss grips the report while contemplating the enormous impact of the newly formed alliance. He reflects on how the kingdom's magical culture has undergone a sudden, rapid progression. Several unreleased ancient grimoires remain safely stored away within the territory's most secure vaults. The commander realizes that the Marquis has secured a massive advantage by partnering with Ines. His thoughts shift toward the head of the Sobi family and their likely future moves. He lets out a tense laugh as cold sweat beads on his intensely focused face. The quiet mansion stands under a dark sky while he complains about his aching muscles. Various royal figures and powerful nobles begin to move as the political landscape shifts. Mysterious forces belonging to the Sobi family maintain a watchful presence from the shadows. The delicate three-way balance of power finally shatters as conflict among the factions becomes inevitable. A dark and heavy atmosphere settles over the city as a storm begins to gather.